Chapter 201. Fellow Taoist Yi. After being rejected, Tang Xin still didn't give up. However, he wasn't good with words, so he couldn't reason with her. So he could only walk around Mo Tiange in circles. Mo Tiange said helplessly, "Fellow Taoist Tang, you'll get me killed like this." Ha! Tang Xin looked puzzled. Mo Tiange felt even more helpless. If this appearance was seen by others, this admirer of young Master Tang's would definitely hate her to the bone, and might even fight her with a sword. With their jealous temperaments, she wouldn't be able to explain herself at that time. Big Brother Tang. Just as she thought about this, the two of them heard a voice. Mo Tiange turned around, and a frown immediately appeared on her face. It was actually Junior Martial Sister Hua, young Master Tang's crazy admirer. Good things never come true, but bad things always do. Being seen by this person. Isn't she trying to kill me? This Junior Martial Sister Hua was alone, but she aggressively approached fellow Taoist Yi. She stared at fellow Taoist Yi and asked condescendingly, "Fellow Taoist Yi, what are you talking about with Big Brother Tang?" "He's the one talking, not me," Mo Tiange thought. She looked at Junior Martial Sister Hua, who was half a head taller than her, and said flatly, "Nothing. If fellow Taoist Hua wants to know, you can ask fellow Taoist Tang." "Is that so?" Her knife-like gaze cut Mo Tiange's face. Mo Tiange didn't doubt that this woman wanted to cut off the flesh on her face piece by piece. She smiled bitterly in her heart. Although Bishuan Court's female cultivators were strong, this wasn't a world where women were respected. Even a soft-hearted man like Tang Xin would probably prefer that Junior Martial Sister Yin she met in Ziwei's Immortal's cave, who liked to act coquettishly, right? Of course, strong women could also be cute, but if their strength turned into coercion, they wouldn't be cute at all. Mo Tiange didn't do anything shameful, so she wasn't afraid of her. She didn't back down and just said coldly, "Does fellow Taoist Hua have anything else to say?" Seeing that Mo Tiange didn't seem to have a guilty conscience, Junior Martial Sister Hua frowned. "Fellow Taoist Yi, I want to ask you what you want to do. Why are you talking to Big Brother Tang instead of studying pill concocting with Junior Martial Sister Xiaoqing?" Seeing that Mo Tiange didn't answer, Junior Martial Sister Hua took another step towards her. "Fellow Taoist Yi, I have to remind you, don't covet things that don't belong to you." Mo Tiange didn't feel weak under Hua Jiyu's intense gaze. Instead, she felt like laughing. She was going to leave anyway, so there was no need for her to be afraid of anything. Thus, the corners of her lips curled into a sneer and she said, "Fellow Taoist Hua, you might as well remind yourself of this." This Junior Martial Sister, Hua obviously didn't expect Mo Tiange would refute her. Moreover, Mo Tiange's words were very rude, so she was stunned for a moment before she finally understood what was going on. She instantly became furious. "Yi Xiaotian, don't be so shameless." The angrier she got, the calmer Mo Tiange became. She even had a smile on her face. "Fellow Taoist Hua, haven't you always wanted to teach me a lesson? Why hasn't he made a move yet? Let me give you a piece of advice. A frog at the bottom of a well can't talk about the sea. With fellow Taoist Hua's temperament, it's fine if he stays in Linhai for the rest of his life, but if he goes to Kunwu one day, you." Junior Martial Sister Hua's expression changed greatly when she heard Mo Tiange's rude words. In all of Bishuan Court, aside from the three elders, no one else dared to talk to her like that. However, Mo Tiange's ice-cold expression made her feel a bit guilty. She also recalled what her elders said a few months ago. "You want to teach that Yi Xiaotian a lesson? Third girl, you really don't know the immensity of heaven and earth." She was unconvinced. "Great-grandmother, she's just a Kunwu cultivator. What's wrong with teaching her a lesson? She still needs our help, but she's actually giving me that attitude." Her great-grandmother, Elder Qingmiao, flung her long sleeves and said coldly, "I said you don't know the immensity of heaven and earth, but you still won't admit it. You've been spoiled rotten by your mother since you were a child. She's just a Kunwu cultivator? You were also there when your senior martial sister sect head made her report. Didn't you hear she's a Xianqing school cultivator? But she's just a foundation-building cultivator. What's so great about her? But she also said she left the mountain to travel under her master's order." Elder Qingmiao glared at her. feeling exasperated at her for failing to meet her expectations. Xianqing School can only accept disciples if they're in the core formation realm or above. Her master must be a core formation cultivator without a doubt. If she's favored, her status in the school won't be lower than yours. They have more nascent soul cultivators than us core formation cultivators. We can't afford to provoke them. She was dumbfounded and momentarily forgot to reply. Ever since she was born, she was the direct descendant of a core formation cultivator, so she was doted on. She never expected a foreign cultivator might have a status not lower than hers. Pulling herself back to reality, she stared at Emo Tienga, who was looking at her with an arrogant expression. She'd always used this expression on others. When had anyone ever treated her like this? She was so angry that she lost all reason and said angrily, "Who do you think you are? You actually dared to talk to me like that. Then who do you think you are?" Emo Tienga showed a faint smile, looking calm and composed. "My cultivation level isn't much, and I don't have any strong points." "Do you really think you're amazing, just because you have a core formation elder? Elder sister, with your attitude, you can forget about forming your gold core for the rest of your life. You can just stay in the early stage of the foundation building realm and dream until you die. You." Without saying another word, she pulled out her flying sword and was about to stab Emo Tienga. Emo Tienga took a step back and stared at Tang Shen, who was staring blankly in the corner. "Fellow Taoist Tang." "Huh?" Tang Shen was at a loss. "Do you want to watch your junior martial sister attack a guest in the school?" "Oh." Tang Shen didn't understand, and hastily pulled out his magic tool. Junior martial sister Hua. Seeing that Tang Shen wanted to protect Emo Tienga, this junior martial sister Hua became even angrier. "Big brother Tang, you actually attacked me for her?" Tang Shen wasn't very confident, but in the end, he still plucked up his courage and said, "But fellow Taoist Yi is our honored guest. How could you attack an honored guest?" "Honored guest?" This junior martial sister Hua sneered. "Have you ever seen an honored guest mocking their master? She's the one mocking me." "She's right." A dignified voice came from the side. The three of them turned around and saw a middle-aged woman dressed in plain clothes standing at the entrance of the garden. This woman seemed to be about 40 years old. She didn't have any wrinkles on her face, looked dignified, and had an overbearing aura. Behind her were several maids holding cups. They were quiet and didn't make a single sound. Upon seeing this person, Tang Shen and this junior martial sister Hua were both dumbfounded. Soon after, the two of them hastily put away their magic tools and knelt to salute her. "Great-grandmother. Greetings to elder." The woman nodded slightly and walked over slowly. Her sharp gaze was fixed on Emo Tienga. Emo Tienga showed a faint smile, then cupped her hands and said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner, "Junior Yi Xiaotian greets Elder Qingmiao." Upon hearing this, a hint of admiration appeared in the woman's eyes. She softened her tone and said, "No need to be so polite. You're a smart child." Emo Tienga lowered her hands, lowered her eyes, and didn't say anything. This Elder Qingmiao also no longer looked at her. Her gaze fell on the two juniors kneeling on the ground. "Shen, stand up." Tang Shen looked up anxiously, then answered with a low voice, "Yes. Thank you, elder." This junior martial sister Hua also wanted to stand up, but when she raised her head and saw the stern gaze on her, she didn't have the courage. She bit her lip and continued to kneel. Some maids had already come to tidy up the mess in the pavilion, laid down the plates and cushions, then retreated to the side. Elder Qingmiao walked into the pavilion and sat down. She took the green tea the maids had just brewed and slowly took a sip. She then said, "Lin, you're already in your 40s this year, right?" Junior martial sister Hua, who was kneeling on the ground, answered in a low voice. The corners of Emo Tienga's mouth curled up. In fact, she called this woman big sister, just to annoy her. She didn't expect the woman to be older than her, so what she said just now wasn't wrong. She was already in her 40s, but she was still so unruly. Even if foundation building cultivators had a lifespan of more than 300 years, based on the way she lived, she wouldn't make any progress, even if she lived for more than 300 years. In this lifetime, she shouldn't even think about advancing to the middle stage or late stage. Elder Qingmiao put down her teacup, and her gaze turned cold. You're already in your 40s, yet you still have the nerve to admit it. I've told you before, don't be so arrogant. You didn't listen to me. But great-grandmother. But what? Elder Qingmiao interrupted her and slammed the table. Hua Yilin, do you think you can do whatever you want just because you have an old woman like me as your backer? Your mother didn't teach you well since you were young, and you don't know how to learn well. If you had the ability, you could have formed your gold core by yourself. But what do you have now? You're just an initial stage foundation establishment cultivator, yet you don't know how to improve. Mo Tiange stood on the side, watching as if this matter had nothing to do with her. So this junior martial sister Hua's name was Hua Yilin. What a waste of a good name. Hua Yilin, who was kneeling on the ground, pursed her lips and said nothing. Elder Qingmiao glared at her angrily. What? Do you feel wronged? I think this little fellow Taoist is right. Just because he had a core formation elder, he thought he was really something. Can you rely on me for the rest of your life? Do you not want to make a realm breakthrough in the future? Last time, when I sent a disciple out, I should have thrown you out and let you go to Kunwu to broaden your horizons, lest you embarrass yourself in the future. His words were harsh, and they were truly ruthless. Hua Yilin's eyes reddened. She glared at Mo Tiange angrily, but she didn't dare to refute. Elder Qingmiao became even angrier. What? You're not convinced? Fine. Since there are guests here today, I won't lecture you too much. Go to the reflection temple and face the wall by yourself. You're not allowed to come out until I say you can. Great-grandmother. Hua Yilin was so shocked that tears fell from her eyes. Quickly go. Elder Qingmiao glared at her mercilessly. Mo Tiange bit her lip, stood up, and dashed away. Seeing her leaving obediently, Elder Qingmiao's expression finally relaxed. She then glanced at Tang Shen. Shen, if there's nothing else, go and serve your great-grandmother. She was thinking about you just now. Tang Shen felt as if he was granted amnesty. He hastily saluted and said, yes. Then he hurriedly ran away. In the blink of an eye, aside from Mo Tiange, Elder Qingmiao and her maids were the only ones left on the scene. Mo Tiange's gaze flickered, but in the end, she chose to remain silent. She used the method she used to deal with elders at Xianqing school. She lowered her head and stood quietly on the side. Elder Qingmiao didn't look at her right away. Instead, she took the handkerchief the maid gave her, carefully wiped her face, then raised her head to look at Mo Tiange. She looked at her very carefully and for a long time, but Mo Tiange's expression remained calm. Finally, Elder Qingmiao withdrew her gaze, picked up the teacup again and said slowly, little fellow Taoist, you really aren't simple. Chapter 202. This was Mo Tiange's first time meeting Elder Qingmiao. She'd been at Bishuan court for several months, but all this time, it was always Wei Haolan and the other foundation-building cultivators who received her. The 3 core formation elders had never met her. Of course, he was a core formation realm senior. Generally speaking, core formation cultivators cultivated in seclusion, who would want to meet a junior who wasn't from their own sect. They weren't that free, and they wouldn't do something that would lower their status. However, even if she hadn't met the 3 core formation elders, she was never worried Elder Qingmiao would really harm her. She had taken over Shangqing Palace's affairs and helped Lord Taoist Jinghe make connections. So Mo Tiange was very clear about the twists and turns in the hearts of high-level cultivators in cultivation groups. In the eyes of high-grade cultivators, especially those who supported their sects, no matter how much they doted on their juniors, it was impossible for it to affect their view of benefits. Although they doted on their children, they couldn't mix these feelings with official business. Therefore, Hua Yilin's threat sounded like a joke to those in the know. But now, Elder Qingmiao used this kind of tone to say something like that to her, which was thought-provoking. Not simple. What was not simple? Aside from her pill concocting skills, in the eyes of Bishuan court cultivators, Mo Tiange was just an ordinary foreign cultivator. What Elder Qingmiao said definitely wasn't a compliment to her pill concocting skills. Mo Tiange's expression didn't change. She merely raised her gaze slightly and said, "Senior, you flatter me." Elder Qingmiao gently swirled the teacup in her hand, but didn't drink it. She said slowly, I wasn't praising you. Since Senior didn't say anything, Junior can only take it as praise. Emotienga still had a faint smile on her face. It seemed she didn't mind Emotienga's words at all. Elder Qingmiao once again looked up at her with a sharp gaze. Emotienga didn't feel guilty at all, and just let her look. Time passed bit by bit. Elder Qingmiao even used the spiritual aura pressure of a core formation cultivator. But Emotienga still had a faint smile on her face. Although her smile was somewhat stiff, and her forehead was even covered in sweat, she was still smiling in the end. After a long time, Elder Qingmiao finally withdrew her spiritual aura pressure and asked coldly, You, who are you in the end? Emotienga secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Even though she cultivated the soul-refining art, and the strength of her divine sense was far stronger than that of cultivators in the same realm as her, a core formation cultivator was still a core formation cultivator. She almost used all her strength to resist this spiritual aura pressure. She naturally knew why Elder Qingmiao treated her like this. Emotienga had long formed a habit of using her divine sense to pay attention to her surroundings at all times. So she immediately knew Elder Qingmiao was here. But even though she knew, she still said those words to Hua Yilin. As a core formation cultivator, Elder Qingmiao couldn't help but feel a bit embarrassed when a junior was lectured like that by a junior. It was precisely because she couldn't hold back her pride that she reprimanded Hua Yilin even more. She wanted to show that as a core formation cultivator, she would never shield a junior and lower her status. However, reprimanding was one thing. But in the end, they were still her descendants. She also wanted to see why this junior, who dared to lecture her descendants, had such guts. He knew a core formation cultivator was coming, but he still wanted to teach a disciple of Bishuan Court a lesson. How could an early-stage foundation-building cultivator be so bold? Emotienga only took a moment to think before she answered. Junior is the disciple of Lord Daoist Xianin from Xianqing School. Lord Daoist Xianin. Elder Qingmiao slowly uttered this Daoist name. The way she looked at Emotienga gradually changed. In the end, the fierceness in her expression disappeared, and she showed a faint smile. Turns out your master is a nascent soul cultivator. No wonder he has such guts. Even if she didn't know about Lord Daoist Xianin, he was naturally a nascent soul cultivator. As one of the 3 great core formation elders, with the highest cultivation level in Bishuan Court, Elder Qingmiao naturally wouldn't be ignorant of this. Emotienga merely smiled and maintained her politeness. Junior was just very lucky. Although that was the case, how could a nascent soul cultivator accept a disciple so easily? If she had a nascent soul cultivator as her master, the benefits would be obvious. After forming her gold core, every step of cultivation would be difficult. 2/3 of core formation cultivators would be stuck in the early stage of the core formation realm for their entire lives. With the guidance of a nascent soul cultivator, not only would they be able to avoid many detours in the core formation realm, but they could also give them pointers when they tried to form their nascent soul. As Elder Qingmiao thought about it carefully, she couldn't help but feel jealous. Although she was an elder of a cultivation group and a dignified core formation cultivator, she couldn't worship a nascent soul senior as her master right now. Nevertheless, she was an elder of a cultivation group after all. So she quickly calmed down and said with a faint smile, In that case, little fellow Taoist must have excellent spiritual roots and extraordinary talents, right? Emotienga answered faintly. Junior's aptitude isn't bad. So Junior was able to receive Master as her master's disciple. Is that so? Little fellow Taoist's pill concocting skills are also extraordinary, Elder Qingmiao said disapprovingly. Emotienga was keenly aware of something. Her gaze fell on Elder Qingmiao's half-smiling face and she said bluntly, Does Senior have some advice? Elder Qingmiao stood up and slowly paced around the pavilion, seemingly thinking about something. After a long time, she finally said, Little friendy, do you know of a kind of medicinal pill called Clear Sky Pill? Emotienga was stunned. This is a high-level core formation medicinal pill that's 10 times better than soul-solidifying pills. When she first obtained the virtual sky world, because the medicinal plants growing inside were very suitable for concocting this pill, She used this clear sky pill to practice. Correct. Elder Qingmiao nodded. Little friend, you really came from a famous cultivation group. Your vision is extraordinary. Very few people know about this clear sky pill. Junior's master also made a realm breakthrough several years ago, so Junior can still be considered clear about matters related to the core formation realm. Elder Qingmiao smiled at her while walking slowly. Even so, I can see that little friend Yi is very valued by your master. At first, she called her little friend Yi, but now she called her little friend Yi. This form of address was much more intimate. Mo Tiange could tell that Elder Qingmiao intentionally wanted to get closer to her. Based on what she said, it was very likely related to medicinal pills. In any case, she still had some confidence in the Tao of pill concocting, so she didn't avoid the topic. Yes, Junior's achievements today are all thanks to Master's careful guidance. Seeing how calm Mo Tiange was, Elder Qingmiao inwardly re-evaluated her identity. Little friend Yi has such brilliant pill concocting skills, and knows about clear sky pills. So can you concoct them? I've concocted them a few times with Master, so I can. But if I were to concoct them myself, I'm afraid the success rate wouldn't be too high. She didn't tell the truth. In fact, she didn't concoct many soul solidifying pills, but she concocted many clear sky pills. For her, the success rate of concocting clear sky pills was much higher than concocting soul solidifying pills. However, how could it be so easy for a foundation building cultivator to successfully concoct clear sky pills? This explanation was more in line with the truth. Sure enough, Elder Qingmiao didn't doubt her. She nodded and said, if you've only concocted them a few times, your success rate naturally wouldn't be high. What's your estimate of your success rate? Mo Tiange paused for a moment, then answered with uncertainty. About 40 to 50%. Elder Qingmiao smiled. 40 to 50% is already pretty good. It seems little friend Ye's pill concocting skills are indeed extraordinary. 30 to 40% was the standard for ordinary concoctions masters. Although 40 to 50% seemed like an uncertain increase of 10%, it was already close to the level of great concoctions masters. After all, clear sky pills were high-grade medicinal pills, so they were several times more difficult to concoct than soul-solidifying pills. Even in Kunwu, there weren't many people who could reach the level of great concoctions masters. Little friend Yi. Elder Qingmiao hesitated for a moment, but a moment later, she made up her mind. During this period of time, we've been watching you teaching that girl Xia Qing pill concocting skills, so we have a good idea of your pill concocting skills. It just so happens that during this period of time, the three of us have gathered enough spiritual plants for a furnace of clear sky pills, so we need to concoct a furnace of pills. However, Xia Qing has never concocted clear sky pills before, so she's not confident. If we send people to Kunwu to ask someone to concoct pills for us, it'll take too much time, and it'll also be hard to find a trustworthy person, so. She stopped and looked at Mo Tiange. Little friend Yi, could you concoct a furnace of clear sky pills for us? Mo Tiange didn't answer immediately. Concocting clear sky pills wasn't a trivial matter. Not to mention the success rate, it would also take a long time. Of course. We trust little friend Ye's pill concocting skills, and we trust little friend Ye's character even more. If the concoction fails, we definitely won't make things difficult for you. If you succeed, we'll prepare another generous gift to thank little friend Yi for helping us. Mo Tiange glanced at Elder Qingmiao, then continued to ponder. After a long time, a smile finally appeared on her face. Since Senior said so, I have no reason to refuse. Elder Qingmiao looked delighted. She warmly held Mo Tiange's hand and patted it. Good. Although little friend Yi is a nascent soul Senior's disciple, and is used to seeing precious treasures, we old fellows can still give you one or two unique little things. Liusu, Elder Qingmiao called out, causing a maid in the queue to step forward. Her cultivation level was already in the 10th layer of the aura refining realm, and she was only a step away from entering the foundation building realm. In the end, she was a core formation elder's maid, so her cultivation level was a bit higher than Yilu and Yiqiu's. Here. A few days ago we caught a feifei. In a bit, you can give it to little friend Yi. A hint of astonishment flitted across the maid's eyes, but she didn't say anything. She only answered, "Yes, Grandmaster." Emotienga also looked surprised. She thought for a moment, then asked, "Senior, are you talking about a kind of divine beast mentioned in ancient texts, Feifei?" "Yes." Elder Qingmiao was also surprised for a moment, but she soon smiled and said, "Little friend Ye is really knowledgeable. Nowadays, very few people know about these so-called divine beasts. However, the one I'm talking about isn't a real Feifei. It just looks like a Feifei, and seems to have the bloodline of a divine beast. So people in the Eastern Sea call these spiritual beasts Feifei. Although Feifei's cultivation levels aren't high, they have miraculous effects that ordinary spiritual beasts don't have." "Oh, may I know what kind of miraculous effects it has?" Elder Qingmiao smiled and said, "According to ancient texts, Feifei can relieve worries. The Feifei we're talking about indeed has the effect of calming one's mind, if you keep it by your side. In addition, Feifei are very sensitive to spiritual aura, so they're the best for searching for things." "So that's how it is," Elder Qingmiao went on to say. "Although this Feifei we're talking about isn't an ancient era's spiritual beast, it's not easy to find one in the Eastern Sea. This can be considered a greeting gift for little friend Yi. When the clear sky pills are successfully concocted, we'll prepare another generous gift for you. Even if it doesn't work, we'll still give little friend Yi compensation for your hard work." "Since Senior said so, it would be impolite for me to refuse." Elder Qingmiao nodded with a smile. Little friend Yi is a straightforward person. If little friend Yi wasn't already a disciple of a famous school, this old woman would have appreciated your talent. What a pity, what a pity. "Oh no, I mean fortunately. Emotienga raised her head. The two of them smiled at each other. Whether they each had their own thoughts or not, they seemed to be very harmonious for now. However, it seemed their return to Kunwu would have to be delayed. Chapter 203. Once they finished talking about business, they chatted a bit more before Elder Qingmiao left. Emotienga heaved a sigh of relief. What she told Elder Qingmiao was always half true. Although she wasn't afraid Elder Qingmiao would harm her, she still felt uneasy facing a core formation cultivator. Once Elder Qingmiao left, Yilu and Ichio came in. "Senior Yi." Emotienga wiped her face. "Why were you gone for so long?" Yilu said. "Junior came back a long time ago, but Elder Qingmiao was here, so Junior didn't dare to disturb you." That being said, although the sect head's conference hall was far away, it wouldn't take that long. She probably came back when Hua Yilin was here, but she didn't dare to come in. Emotienga didn't blame them. They were Bishuan court disciples after all, so they couldn't offend an elder's descendant. "Have you reported it to sect head Wei?" Yilu answered. "Junior already explained it to sect head. Sect head told me to invite Senior Yi to talk about it." She originally wanted to see Wei Haolan to talk about her departure, but after what Elder Qingmiao said, she didn't need to mention it anymore. Nevertheless, it was reasonable for her to talk to Wei Haolan first. After all, elders only made decisions. Some execution matters still needed the sect head's approval. Emotienga said, "And I'll go now." In addition, it was best to mention Tang Shun's matter to Wei Haolan. If something really happened, she didn't want to get involved. Emotienga was silent all the way. When she arrived at the hall, Wei Haolan was already waiting for her. As soon as she saw Emotienga, she came to greet her warmly. "Fellow Taoist Yi, I was held up by some mundane matters just now. I'm really sorry for making you wait for a long time." Emotienga smiled and returned the greeting. "Sect head Wei is too polite. I didn't wait for you, so I came a bit late." Wei Haolan led her inside, and they both took their respective seats. Maids had already served them tea. Emotienga stayed here for several months, and Bishuan Court's hospitality had always been excellent. As soon as the two of them sat down, Wei Haolan said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist Yi, I know a bit about why you came here. However, fellow Taoist Yi should have met Elder Qingmiao, right?" Emotienga said frankly, "Yes, I originally came to say goodbye, but now I don't need to." Apparently, Wei Haolan already knew Elder Qingmiao's plan. Now that she heard what Elder Qingmiao said, she said, "It seems fellow Taoist Yi has agreed to Elder Qingmiao's request." Emotianga nodded. Since Senior Qingmiao has sincerely invited me, I'll have to trouble sect head Wei for a few more days. Wei Haolan smiled happily. What are you talking about, fellow Taoist Yi? If you can stay, everyone in my sect will be very happy. Does fellow Taoist Yi have anything to prepare for this matter? If there's anything you don't like, please don't hesitate to tell me. About that, Emotianga muttered to herself. There were naturally many things she didn't like about concocting medicinal pills. For example, the spiritual aura in the concocting room wasn't abundant enough, the grade of the pill furnace wasn't high enough, and the earthly fire was also a bit lacking. However, Bishuan Court still couldn't meet her requirements. Sect Leader Wei, the earth fire in your sect's concocting room is fine for concocting other medicinal pills, but it's a bit lacking when it comes to concocting clear sky pills. If you have a better concocting fire, you should be able to increase the chances of successfully concocting pills. Oh, Wei Haolan immediately said. What kind of concocting fire does fellow Taoist Yi think you can find? If I can find one, I'll definitely use the entire sect's strength to find one for you. Emotianga smiled. That's not necessary. When it comes to concocting fires, the most common ones are naturally cultivators Dantian real fire, followed by external fires like heavenly fire and earthly fire. Among them, the best are the three great real fires, sun real fire, earthly pole real fire, and samadhi real fire. The easiest to obtain is earthly pole real fire, which can be obtained as long as the earthly fire vein reaches a certain level. However, this isn't something that can be obtained just by begging. If there aren't any good earthly fire veins in Linhai, there's nowhere to get them. Therefore, after thinking about it, I can only ask the three core formation elders for help. Wei Haolan was puzzled. What should the three elders do to find a good concocting fire? There's no need to find one. Emotianga shook her head. Sun real fire can only be found by chance, and Samadhi real fire hasn't appeared for many years. None of the three great real fires can be found in a short time. Only the Dantian real fire of high-level cultivators can match the effects of the three great real fires in pill concocting. Although the concocting fire of core formation cultivators isn't as good, it's much better than the earthly fire currently used in concocting rooms. It should be enough to concoct clear sky pills. Oh, I see. Wei Haolan understood what she meant. Fellow Taoist Yi wants the three elders to use their Dantian real fires to help you concoct medicinal pills? Correct. Emotianga nodded. Of course, the three elders can take turns to rest. Even if it's a bit slow, I reckon 3 days should be enough. This? Wei Haolan hesitated. She thought for a moment then asked. Fellow Taoist Yi, the three elders are the cultivators with the highest cultivation levels in Bishuan Court. Usually, when the three elders are here, other disciples won't dare to offend you. But if the three elders are all tied up by other matters, I understand what sect headway means, Emotianga said with a smile. That's why I said the three elders can take turns to rest. One elder only needs to provide Dantian real fire. Then what about spiritual aura consumption? Is it possible that one of the elders is providing Dantian real fire, while the other two are recovering? Emotianga shook her head. Rest assured, sect headway. According to my estimation, when one elder runs out of spiritual aura, another elder will be able to recover. If they use restorative panaceas, their recovery speed will be even faster. Oh, I see. That being said, there would always be one elder in a state of abundant spiritual aura. Wei Haolan felt relieved and said with a smile, That's easy. I'll explain it to the three elders later. Apart from that, does fellow Taoist Yi have any other requests? Emotianga thought for a moment then shook her head. None for the time being. Wei Haolan heaved a sigh of relief. Her one request already mobilized the three core formation elders. If she had any other requests, she didn't know whether she could fulfill them or not. That being the case, fellow Taoist Yi should rest for a few days. In a few days, when the materials are ready, I'll let fellow Taoist Yi have a look. Emotianga nodded. She indeed had to rest for a few days to adjust her body's condition to its peak. That way her senses would be sharper. However, she hesitated for a moment then said, Sect headway, there's one thing I don't know whether I should tell you or not. What is it? Wei Haolan was a bit puzzled by Emotinga's expression. Emotinga said, "Just now, fellow Taoist Tang Shun from your group mentioned to me whether I could take him with me if I leave." Huh. Wei Haolan was startled then shocked. Her sharp gaze immediately swept over Emotinga. Emotinga knew Wei Haolan misunderstood her. She sighed and continued to say, "I know fellow Taoist Tang is the beloved grandson of an elder from your group, so I refused. Sect head Wei, please forgive me. Fellow Taoist Tang hasn't traveled before, so if he wants someone to take him with him, he should be accompanied by a fellow disciple. It's not appropriate for me to take matters into my own hands." Wei Haolan was also a sensible person. She immediately understood the meaning behind Emotinga's words, and said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist Yi, you're being too polite." This matter was presumably junior martial brother Tang's impulsive action, and it was originally inappropriate. It's only natural that fellow Taoist refused. Seeing that Wei Haolan understood what she meant, Emotinga smiled and said, "I'll talk to Sect Head Wei about this matter. Alright, I'll go back and rest. I'll have to trouble Sect Head Wei to handle other chores." "Of course. Fellow Taoist Yi, please go." Wei Haolan cordially saw her off. When Emotinga returned to the VIP building, the maid named Liusu was already waiting outside. She was holding a pure white spiritual beast in her arms. Its spiritual aura didn't seem to be rich. It seemed to be only in the first rank. As soon as she saw Emotinga, Liusu bowed and saluted her. "Senior Yi, Junior was ordered by Grandmaster to bring Feifei here. No need to be so polite." Emotinga looked at the Feifei in Liusu's arms and asked curiously, "This is a Feifei? Why does it look like it's only in the first rank?" Liusu answered, "Senior, this Feifei is still a cub. Our Grandmaster caught it not long ago. It was just born at that time. Moreover, Feifei are spiritual beasts with mediocre cultivation levels. Generally, adult Feifei are only in the second or third rank. They have a kind of miraculous ability. No matter how ferocious a spiritual beast is, it can coexist peacefully with them. So that's how it is." Emotinga reached out her hand and stroked the little beast that looked like a fox, but was only as big as a kitten. Its eyes were closed. She didn't know whether it was sleeping or not, but it didn't move at all, and let Emotinga stroke it. Liusu handed the Feifei to her. "Senior Yi, this spiritual beast has already hatched, so it can't recognize its master. However, Senior can use your divine comprehension to establish a contract with it to make it obey you." "Contract?" Emotinga raised her eyebrows. "Isn't a spiritual beast contract a contract to recognize its master?" Liusu was dumbfounded, but she soon smiled and said, "Senior, don't you know that there's a kind of spiritual beast contract where both parties sign a contract?" Seeing that Emotinga really didn't know, she explained, "Presumably, Senior doesn't know much about spiritual beasts, right? If the spiritual beast hasn't hatched yet, we can drip blood on it to recognize its master. But if it's already hatched, we can establish a subordinate contract with it. This can only be done if your divine comprehension is much stronger than the spiritual beasts. With this kind of spiritual beast contract, not only can the spiritual beast not harm its master, but the master also can't harm the spiritual beast." "I see." Emotinga roughly understood. Generally speaking, after a spiritual beast recognized its master, even its life belonged to its master, and the master didn't have any obligations. However, with this subordinate contract, the master could only order the spiritual beast, but it didn't mean he had the spiritual beast. After thinking it through, Emotinga asked, "Miss, can you tell me how to establish a subordinate contract?" Liusu smiled and said, "This isn't a secret technique, so of course I can." She then told Emotinga in detail how to establish the contract. In the end, she said, "Senior Yi, rest assured. This subordinate contract can be cancelled. Grandmaster Qingmiao already cancelled the contract before, so you can establish a new contract with the Feifei." "I understand. Thank your Grandmaster on my behalf." Liusu bowed, gave her a jade slip that recorded how to raise a Feifei, then took her leave. As soon as Liusu left, Yilu and Ichio surrounded her. "So this is a Feifei. It looks so cute." "Yes, it looks like a raccoon. but it's much cuter than a raccoon. The two of them had been with Emotienga for a long time, so they were familiar with her temperament, so they dared to get close to her. Emotienga smiled and asked, "Haven't you seen a Feifei before?" "Yes." Ichio looked up and said, "Feifei are very rare. Although they don't have any attack power, their ability to find spiritual objects is very good, and they look cute. Whenever one appears, the asking price is extremely high. How could we have the money to buy one?" Ichio said, "Even if we have the money, we can't buy one. Even the sect head doesn't have one. So how could we have a chance?" "That's right. In other words, this Feifei was really rare. Elder Qingmiao was really willing to pay to befriend her." Chapter 204. After obtaining the Feifei, Emotienga followed Liusu's instructions and signed a subordinate contract with it. She then gave this little spiritual beast to Yilu and Ichio to take care of. She didn't take it with her because she didn't have time right now, and because Yilu and Ichio liked this kind of spiritual beast very much and always wanted to touch and hug it. So she might as well comply with their wishes. Spiritual beasts like the Feifei were cute, harmless, and had the function of calming one's mind and searching for spiritual objects. So girls liked them the most. However, Emotienga didn't have much of a woman's temperament. She also had the spirit-concealing pendant and countless medicinal pills, so she only had a dispensable attitude towards the Feifei. However, this was Elder Qingmiao's kind intentions, so it would be embarrassing if she didn't accept it. After resting for a few days, she began to prepare to concoct clear sky pills. Emotienga was already very familiar with concocting clear sky pills, but this was the first time the people from Bishuan court concocted clear sky pills, so they were extremely nervous. Xiaqing asked her more than once whether she could really concoct them. At first, Emotienga comforted her, but in the end, she simply didn't answer. She had already concocted clear sky pills countless times. Even if she used an ordinary concocting furnace and a core formation cultivator's concocting fire, she would still have a success rate of more than 60%. If everything went according to her plan and no one made a mistake, her success rate would reach 70%. If she told Elder Qingmiao about this, she would probably be very happy. Even in Kunwu, it would be very difficult to find a concocting master with a success rate of 70%, so she could only look for one in a pill concocting sect like Pill Cauldron sect. Several days passed in the blink of an eye. The preparations for concocting clear sky pills were completed, and Xiaqing showed the processed spiritual plants to Emotienga. Although their age wasn't too high, and their quality wasn't very good, the amount was quite enough. Taking into account the failure rate, she estimated she could make about 30 pills. Clear sky pills weren't the aura-nourishing pills or aura-converging pills used by aura-refining cultivators. They contained a large amount of spiritual aura, so it would take about 10 days to half a month to refine the spiritual aura inside each pill. This mini clear sky pills should be enough for the 3 core formation cultivators to cultivate for more than half a year. As for core formation cultivators, it was very rare for them to continuously use medicinal pills to cultivate. This number was already a very impressive number. Emotienga told Wei Haolan her conclusion. As a result, the 3 core formation elders wanted to see her on the same day. Emotienga had seen a lot of core formation cultivators, so she didn't feel nervous at all. However, these 3 core formation cultivators were the best cultivators in Bishuan court after all, so it was better for her to act a bit more cautiously. After being led by Wei Haolan for a long time, Emotienga finally arrived at a floating pagoda towering in the clouds. Wei Haolan introduced, "This pagoda was built by the founder of our sect. It's called the Tao Achieving Pagoda. This pagoda is very special. The spiritual aura here is very rich, and the spiritual aura on each floor doesn't interfere with each other. Because of that, once cultivators form their gold cores in Bishuan court, they'll move to this pagoda to cultivate." Emotienga stared at the pagoda floating in the clouds and shrouded in immortal aura. She sighed and said, "Turns out there's actually such a marvelous sight in this world. If I didn't go out, I wouldn't have known the world was so vast." Just by standing outside the pagoda, One could already feel the spiritual energy in the pagoda assaulting one's senses. One could imagine how thick the spiritual energy in the pagoda was. The founder of Bishuan Court was indeed an outstanding person of her generation. Wei Haolan smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist, ye understands this very well. And you're also the descendant of a famous cultivation group. Presumably several hundred years later, you'll also have a chance to reach the great Tao." Emo Tienga shook her head with a smile, but didn't say anything else. When they reached the bottom of the pagoda, they saw a transporting formation laid on the ground. Wei Haolan invited Emo Tienga to stand on it, then the transporting formation was activated. A white light flashed, and the two of them were already standing inside the pagoda. The inside of the pagoda was very spacious, but it was empty aside from several praying mats. Upon seeing them, a middle-aged male cultivator with 3 strands of long beard walked towards them. "Greetings to the sect head." Perhaps because this male cultivator was a core formation cultivator's personal disciple, he obviously wasn't as frightened as the other male cultivators when facing Wei Haolan. His attitude was polite, but his expression was calm. Wei Haolan's attitude was also quite polite. "Senior Marshal Brother Shangguan, I brought this fellow Taoist Yi to see the 3 elders. Do the 3 elders have time?" The male cultivator's gaze fell on Emo Tienga, and he quickly sized her up. He seemed a bit surprised at her young age, but he very politely withdrew his gaze and nodded towards her. "So this is fellow Taoist Yi." Emo Tienga was also quite surprised because this male cultivator was actually a late-stage foundation building cultivator. Moreover, he seemed to have already reached the peak stage of the foundation building realm. Emo Tienga raised her hands and clasped her hands in return. The male cultivator's gaze returned to Wei Haolan. "The elders are on the 3rd floor. They're waiting for the 2 of you." "Thank you, Senior Marshal Brother Shangguan." After Wei Haolan expressed her gratitude, she pulled Emo Tienga to the other side, then stepped on the transporting formation again. The transporting formation was activated. After the white light faded, the 2 of them went to the next floor. This floor was empty. "Fellow Taoist Yi, aren't you very curious? Among our foundation building cultivators, the one with the highest cultivation level is actually Senior Marshal Brother Shangguan." Emo Tienga turned her head, feeling puzzled. This was Bishuan Court's business. She didn't ask, so why did Wei Haolan want to talk about it? Wei Haolan's expression was still as calm as ever, but there was a hint of jealousy in the corners of her eyes. She said flatly, "Who told Senior Marshal Brother Shangguan to be a cultivator with mutated spiritual roots that we haven't recruited in several hundred years?" Wei Haolan then turned to smile at Emo Tienga. "Fellow Taoist Yi, don't you think it's very interesting? Bishuan Court is a cultivation group for female cultivators, but the disciple with the highest aptitude is actually a male disciple." Emo Tienga shook her head. "The matter of spiritual roots has always been difficult to control. Whether it's a man or a woman isn't something that can be decided by human strength. Take Xianqing School for example. In the entire school, in terms of aptitude, she was probably the one with the highest, right? However, for several generations, not only were all the genius disciples with single spiritual roots at Xianqing School male, but among the 6 great nascent soul cultivators, there was only 1 female cultivator." "You're right." Wei Haolan smiled bitterly. "Alas, although we all know it's not Senior Marshal Brother Shangguan's fault, we still feel embarrassed. In fact, weren't the 3 elders the same? But there's nothing we can do about it. Senior Marshal Brother Shangguan is currently the cultivator most likely to reach core formation in our sect, and he even has a chance to advance to nascent soul. It's been more than 1,000 years since a nascent soul cultivator appeared in our Bishuan Court. We can't miss this opportunity, even if it's a male cultivator." At the end of her speech, Wei Haolan's face revealed a resolute expression. Emo Tienga couldn't help but admire Wei Haolan. Although she was jealous, she was still able to restrain herself for the sake of the sect. Such a person was indeed suitable to be a sect leader. Sect head Wei's magnanimity is admirable. Wei Haolan shook her head. "In fact, I feel very uncomfortable inside. I feel stifled if I don't say it out loud. I know fellow Taoist Yi isn't a talkative person, but it's hard for me to say these words to my fellow martial sisters. A male cultivator is actually the most promising cultivator our Bichuan court has spent all of its resources to cultivate. Even I have to be summoned by the 3 elders to enter this Dao-achieving pagoda. But he broke the rules of this place and started cultivating here as soon as he built his foundation. At this point, Mo Tiange suddenly felt a bit strange. Sect headway. Since this fellow Taoist Shengguan has outstanding talents and has always been cultivated with all our might, why does he still look like a middle-aged man? Wei Haolan was dumbfounded but soon smiled. Fellow Taoist, you came from Kunwu, so you don't know about the situation in Linhai. If there were enough medicinal pills, senior martial brother Shengguan would have long formed his gold core. It's just that he's always lacked medicinal pills and couldn't concoct dustless pills. So he's been delayed for many years. Oh, I see. Mo Tiange finally understood. Wasn't the reason Bichuan court treated her so warmly because of her pill concocting skills? They lacked resources, and their pill concocting skills were also backward. Even talented cultivators would find it hard to stand out. The 2 of them stayed on this floor for a while. Wei Haolan heaved a sigh to relieve her mood before she smiled again. Fellow Taoist Yi, let's go up. The 3rd floor is just above us. Mo Tiange nodded, then followed Wei Haolan into the transporting formation. With a flash of white light, they arrived on the 3rd floor. They're here. Mo Tiange heard a kind voice, so she looked towards the direction of the voice. She saw 3 core formation female cultivators sitting on this floor. The one on the left was Elder Qingmiao. The one on the right looked like she was in her early 30s. She looked well-maintained and was very beautiful. Mo Tiange found some similarities between Tang Shun and her face, so she guessed this must be Elder Qingxi. As for the female cultivator in the middle, she looked the most powerful. So she must be the cultivator with the highest cultivation level in Bichuan court, Elder Qingyi. She looked about the same age as Elder Qingmiao, but she looked much kinder. Wei Haolan led Mo Tiange over, then respectfully greeted the 3 elders. Haolan greets the 3 elders. Elder Qingyi, who was in the middle, smiled and said, "No need to be so polite." Her voice was the same as before. "Thank you, elder." Wei Haolan stood up and introduced them to Mo Tiange. "These are the 3 core formation elders of our group. Fellow Taoist, you should have met Elder Qingmiao before. These are Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingxi." Mo Tiange's guess was correct. The one in the middle was Elder Qingyi, and the one on the right was Elder Qingxi. Junior greets the 3 elders. Mo Tiange cupped her hands and saluted them. The 3 elders were interested to see her neither servile nor overbearing manner. Elder Qingyi smiled and said, "Little friend, you doesn't need to be so polite." She then turned to the other 2 elders and said, "Sure enough, you're from a famous cultivation group. You can't find many people with this kind of bearing in our group." Elder Qingmiao nodded. "Senior martial sister is right. It seems we have to send more disciples out to gain experience in the future. They'll only grow if they gain more experience. And, speaking of gaining experience, Last Yen and the others have been away for almost 2 years, but there's still no news from them." Mo Tiange's heart skipped a beat when she heard this, but her expression remained unchanged. "Oh, right, little friend Yi is here." Elder Qingyi saw Mo Tiange standing there and said with a smile, "Little friend Yi, please forgive me. I'm old, so I'm a bit muddle-headed." Mo Tiange smiled and lowered her gaze. "You flatter me. Senior doesn't look old at all. We're cultivators. How can we take our appearances seriously?" Elder Qingyi chuckled. "Old is old. No matter how well we take care of ourselves, it's useless. However, little friend Yi is very young. It seems you're not even 50 years old yet, right?" Mo Tiange answered, "Senior has good eyesight. Junior is 39 years old now. Little friend Yi is indeed young and promising. At such a young age, not only do you have outstanding pill concocting skills, but your cultivation level is also in the late stage of the foundation building realm." Mo Tiange was startled and raised her head. Elder Qingyi, who was still smiling amiably, said slowly, "What's even rarer is that little friend Ye's breath-concealing technique is also so outstanding that even core formation cultivators can't see through it." Chapter 205. Mo Tiange's smile froze. She stared at the three core formation cultivators without saying a word. Among the three people in front of them, Elder Qingmiao had a frown on her face, Elder Qingxi had a vigilant look on her face, and Elder Qingyi still had a smile on her face, as if what she said was nothing more than a trivial matter. Wei Haolan, who was standing next to her, widened her eyes in shock. Elder, you mean? She turned to look at Emotienga, then slowly took a step back. Although she looked calm on the surface, countless thoughts were flashing through her mind. Zhang Muling once said that with the spirit-concealing pendant he refined again, it wouldn't be a problem even if she pretended to be immortal. He was one of the most powerful cultivators in the human world, who had reached the soul formation stage for thousands of years. Logically speaking, even nascent soul cultivators shouldn't be able to tell. But how could three completion-leveled cultivators see through her real cultivation level? So what do we do now? Fight. She wasn't arrogant enough to think she had the ability to escape unscathed under the watchful eyes of three great core formation cultivators. Besides, a short time wasn't enough for her to enter the virtual sky world. What else could they do? The three core formation cultivators were either expressionless or smiling as they looked at her. But there was a hint of vigilance in their eyes. In the end, Emotienga showed a faint smile. Senior has good eyes. May I know how you saw through it? Little friendy, you're also very calm. Elder Qingyi nodded with a smile. In fact, there's no harm in telling you. Elder Qingmiao, who was standing on the side, also chuckled. She took over the conversation and said, Little friendy, don't overthink things. This Tao-achieving pagoda is a sacred place established by the founder of Bishuan Court. There are many restrictions and mechanisms inside. Even we, the juniors who inherited it, can't figure them out. One of them is that no matter who enters this tower, all illusions will be seen through by cultivators with higher cultivation. In a way, the breath concealment technique is also an illusion. I see. She originally thought this primordial Lady Bishui was an outstanding talent of her generation. But now it seems she was also a heaven-gifted genius who wasn't inferior to Wanderer Ziwei. Even though she was well-read, she still hadn't seen this kind of restriction before. When she thought up to this point, Emotienga warned herself inwardly. Even if her aptitude was outstanding, and she had a unique treasure in her hands, she still couldn't underestimate other cultivators. The world was so big, so how many extraordinary people were there? Even if they weren't as talented as her, there were still many who were smarter than her. You don't seem afraid at all. Elder Qingxi, who had been silent all this while, finally spoke. Her tone was cold and her gaze was sharp as she stared at Emotienga. Emotienga raised her eyebrows and smiled. In the beginning, Junior was indeed a bit scared. I didn't expect seniors to suddenly see through my disguise. However, if the three of you want to harm me, all you have to do is move your fingers. Why do you have to be so polite? Besides, apart from concealing my cultivation, I haven't done anything detrimental to your sect, so I don't feel guilty. Oh, Elder Qingyi's interest was piqued. In that case, how do you explain concealing your cultivation level? It's hard to believe that you don't have any malicious intent. Emotienga said unhurriedly. In fact, Senior already told me the reason why Junior concealed my cultivation level. The three elders all revealed puzzled expressions. She continued. When this Junior said that I was 39 years old, the three seniors raised their eyebrows. The reason why this Junior hid my cultivation was because most people would think the same as the three seniors. Oh, Elder Qingyi paused and glanced at the other two elders. In the end, the three of them put away their last doubts. With little friend's age, reaching the late stage of the foundation building realm is indeed too shocking. It's no wonder you were accepted as a disciple by a nascent soul cultivator. Even in the entire celestial pole, such a talent is hard to come by in 1,000 years. A great cultivation group is, after all, a great cultivation group. They were all experienced people who had mingled in the cultivation world for several hundred years. The younger disciples might not have been to Kunwu, but the three core formation elders had definitely seen the world. So how could they not understand what Emotienga said? In addition to pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger, there was also the consideration of protecting oneself. If others misjudged your strength, They might leave you a slim chance of survival when they schemed against you. Elder Qingyi sighed inwardly as she watched Emo Tiange's behavior and listened to what she said. Even though this child was still young, the way she handled things was very steady. In Bishuan court, there were actually very few people who knew how to handle things cautiously. How could this not make people feel discouraged? Elder Qingmiao and Elder Qingxi also had the same expression. After their doubts were gone, their expressions became solemn again. They were shocked to see a genius that was hard to come by in 1,000 years. But they also thought about Bishuan court's current situation. On the other hand, they were also wondering whether they should change the way they managed the group. To them, reaching the late stage of the foundation-building realm at the age of 39 was completely unimaginable. Although they lived in Linhai, they were connected to Kunwu through a transporting formation, so their news wasn't lagging behind. In Kunwu, cultivators who could form their gold core in 100 years were few in 1,000 years, and every one of them was called a genius. That being the case, being in the late stage of the foundation-building realm at the age of 39, she might be able to form her gold core in 20 to 30 years. Forming her gold core at the age of 70 would be a genius among geniuses. However, Xianqing School actually let such a genius among geniuses do as she pleased, allowing her to go out and gain experience by herself. In contrast, Bishuan Court, not to mention having such a genius, even the disciple with mutated spiritual roots they received with great difficulty, was carefully kept by their side. For more than 100 years, they never let that disciple leave the sect. Even other foundation-building cultivators with a bit of future didn't dare to leave the sect to gain experience. The three elders silently pondered for a while without saying anything. Wei Haolan, who was standing on the side, kept shifting her gaze between them. At that moment, she couldn't help but step forward and ask, "Elders, is fellow Taoist Yi really in the late stage of the foundation-building realm?" Elder Qingyi nodded. "Haolan, it's good that you know about this. Don't leak it out, lest you get into a lot of trouble." "Yes," Wei Haolan answered in a low voice, then turned her head to look at Emo Tiange. Her gaze was filled with complicated emotions, but in the end, she just sighed quietly and looked away. Regarding this fellow Taoist Yi, she was originally just envious of her good luck. She was actually a disciple of one of the biggest cultivation groups in the Celestial Pole. But that was all. With her status as the sect head, she really didn't need to be too fixated on this matter. Unfortunately, she now found out that this fellow Taoist Yi was already a late-stage foundation-building cultivator at such a young age. This was really incomparable. "Little friend Yi, you're so young, but you already have such a profound cultivation level. Why do you also have top-notch pill concocting skills?" Elder Qingmiao asked. Emo Tiange instantly thought of the answer to this question. To be honest, although my aptitude can be considered excellent, I advanced after I built my foundation, because I obtained fated chances. I didn't immerse myself in cultivation every day. I usually study pill concocting skills to adjust my mood. Besides, although my pill concocting skills are very brilliant in the eyes of non-pill concocting cultivators, compared to pill concocting cultivation groups like Danding School, they're really nothing. Really? Elder Qingxi's eyes were still filled with doubt. The three of us aren't ignorant frogs at the bottom of a well. In the past, we also concocted clear sky pills. At that time, we went to Danding School to find a concocting master. Reportedly, that master's pill concocting realm was already extremely high, but he still couldn't achieve a success rate of 60% or 70%. Fellow Taoist Yi, why is your pill concocting skills better than those of Danding School cultivators, even though you're not a pill concocting cultivator? It's very simple, Emo Tiange said calmly. Although Danding School is a pill concocting cultivation group, not everyone's aptitude for pill concocting is better than others. In terms of aptitude for pill concocting, Junior is confident I'm not inferior to others. In order to cover up the secret of the virtual sky world, she had to boast. If she said her aptitude for pill concocting wasn't good, who would believe she had a pretty good pill concocting skill? She paused for a moment, then continued. Moreover, seniors, please forgive Junior for speaking the truth. In the past, Danding School was at its peak and ranked among the 7 great cultivation groups. They were arrogant and probably didn't take cultivators from small cultivation groups seriously, so they only used ordinary concocting masters to deal with them. Although they were unhappy, the 3 elders could only admit that what she said was the truth. Even though they were all core formation cultivators, Danding School was quite arrogant before it declined. Even Tiandao sect and Xianqing School often needed their help and were polite to them. After a long time, how could they take core formation cultivators from small cultivation groups seriously? Now, after the demonic beast riot, Danding School's strength was greatly reduced. Being ranked among the 7 great cultivation groups was just a habit. Now, it was reduced to a concocting room for the other 6 great cultivation groups. This was also because Danding School was too arrogant in the past. Otherwise, the other 6 great cultivation groups wouldn't have deliberately delayed the rescue time. Unfortunately, Danding School could only swallow this bitter fruit. In the cultivation world, being a person and managing a cultivation group were the same. If you had outstanding strength, it didn't matter if you were arrogant. But if you didn't have enough strength, it was better to keep a low profile. If you had outstanding strength and kept a low profile, that would be even better. In that case, little friend, you just happened to come to our Lin Hai. It's also our good fortune. Otherwise, it'd be very difficult to find a suitable concocting master in such a short time. Elder Qingmiao glanced at Elder Qingyi, and Elder Qingxi then turned around and said with a smile. Mo Tinga said modestly, "Speaking of concocting, Junior is only SSO. In Kunwu, there are also many great concocting masters, and even great concocting masters. It's just that seniors have been living in Lin Hai for a long time, so you don't have much contact with them." Upon hearing what she said, Elder Qingyi nodded. "Little friend, he is neither arrogant nor rash. My disciples should learn from you." Elder Qingxi's expression was no longer cold, but she still looked solemn as she asked, "Little friendy, if you go out to gain experience like this, will your master feel at ease?" Mo Tiange was slightly surprised and raised her eyebrows. Junior doesn't quite understand what Senior is saying. Why would my master feel at ease? Elder Qingxi said, "With your aptitude, your cultivation level has already reached the late stage of the foundation building realm at such a young age. Presumably, your school also focuses on cultivating a genius disciple, right? Don't tell me your master isn't afraid that something might happen to you when you go out to gain experience?" Her words weren't very auspicious, but Elder Qingxi's tone was very gentle, so Mo Tiange didn't mind. She smiled faintly and said, "Senior doesn't know, but Xianqing School is a Dao school. Aside from cultivation level, we also focus on our mental state. Master often tells me that if one's mental state isn't strong enough, they should be cautious during realm breakthroughs. Junior deeply agrees. If we don't go out to gain experience because we're afraid something might happen, then even a genius disciple can't grow into an outstanding cultivator. If we can't truly grow, what's the use of having great aptitude? In the end, cultivation depends on one's cultivation level, realm, and ability in fights of magical powers. It doesn't depend on aptitude to advance all the way to the nascent soul realm. Therefore, even if there are some losses, it's still worth it." Chapter 206. After Mo Tiange said that, the 3 core formation elders sank into contemplation. In the end, Elder Qingyi heaved a sigh, then waved her hand. "You guys can go. Little friendy, thank you very much for your words today. As for the matter of refining pills, we will naturally do our best to cooperate." Mo Tiange bowed and no longer said anything. Accompanied by Wei Haolan, she stepped into the transporting formation and left the 3rd floor. Upon reaching the 2nd floor, Wei Haolan couldn't help but take a second look at Mo Tiange. "Fellow Taoist Yi, are you really in the late stage of the foundation building realm?" When Mo Tiange saw the vigilance in Wei Haolan's eyes, and recalled what Wei Haolan said to her before they went up, Mo Tiange knew Wei Haolan was now suspicious of her. However, aside from borrowing the transporting formation, Mo Tiange didn't have any other requests from Bishuan Court. Because of that, she was also frank and open, allowing Mo Tiange to size her up. That's right. When I'm outside, I have to be careful. I didn't mean to deceive you. Please forgive me, Sect Master Wei. Upon seeing Mo Tianga's natural demeanor, and the fact that the three elders didn't make things difficult for her, and even spoke to her, Wei Haolan finally stopped thinking about her. Rest assured, fellow Taoist Yi, I'll naturally obey the elders' orders. Even so, Wei Haolan still turned her face away. She must have felt uncomfortable when she realized that the person she was talking about was hiding something from her. Although the two of them could not be considered friends, after so many days together, they had developed a certain level of trust in each other. Some words were spoken because of this trust. Therefore, even though Wei Haolan knew that it was not her fault, she was still unhappy. Mo Tiange didn't say anything. The two of them walked in silence until they reached the first floor. The middle-aged male cultivator surnamed Shengguan was still there. When he saw them coming down, he stood up and greeted them. Sect head, fellow Taoist Yi. This person was very polite to Mo Tiange. When they first met, surprise flashed in his eyes. Mo Tiange originally thought he was used to being polite and courteous to female cultivators in a cultivation group for female cultivators, so she didn't pay much attention to him. In reality, this person had been carefully trained by the three core formation elders. He himself was already in the peak stage of the foundation building realm. Why would he be so polite to a cultivator in the early stage of the foundation building realm? It was naturally because his cultivation level was slightly higher than Mo Tiange's. So as soon as she came in, he discovered that this fellow Taoist Yi was actually a late-stage foundation building cultivator. Some things could be traced, but they were originally scattered and could not be pieced together. However, if one obtained the answer, one would discover that there were clues everywhere. As she thought up to this point, Mo Tiange's expression began to waver. Wasn't it the same back then? Before he discovered it, he didn't suspect anything at all. But when he thought about it, he realized that the answer was only natural. However, she still didn't want to face the answer. After all, they wouldn't be related in the future. Fellow Taoist Yi? Wei Haolan's voice rang in his ears. Mo Tiange regained her train of thought. She cupped her hands to salute the male cultivator, then went down the Dao Achieving Pagoda with Wei Haolan. After exiting the Dao Achieving Pagoda, she raised her head to look at the pagoda floating in the clouds. She couldn't help but sigh. It was actually able to make her spirit-concealing pendant lose its effect. From this, it could be seen how amazing the restrictions in this Dao Attainment Pagoda were. Furthermore, this pagoda was created by a nascent soul female cultivator, who said that female cultivators were inferior to male cultivators. There were also geniuses among them, but there weren't many female cultivators who were willing to work hard. Fellow Taoist Yi, aside from your cultivation level, do you really not have anything else to hide? Wei Haolan also stopped in front of the pagoda and stared at Mo Tiange. Mo Tiange shifted her gaze from the pagoda and showed a faint smile. Maybe I'm hiding something, but I can assure Sect Head Wei that these things are of no importance to Bishuan Court. She also hid her name and master. This was Lord Taoist Jinghe's request. The reason for this was because before she left, Master Song Feng came looking for revenge, and even said he wouldn't let this enmity rest. Although this master of hers cared about his reputation, he wasn't pedantic. He was willing to hide her master's identity to avoid unnecessary danger. For outsiders, however, it didn't matter whose disciple she was in Xianqing school. Wei Haolan stared at her for a long time, before she finally withdrew her gaze and accepted Mo Tiange's explanation. That being the case, I won't meddle too much. Fellow Taoist Yi, it won't be a problem to start concocting medicinal pills tomorrow, right? Mo Tiange nodded. No problem. For her, concocting clear sky pills didn't require much preparation. Then I'll take fellow Taoist back. Thank you for your trouble. The two of them walked together without saying a word along the way. When they weren't far from the VIP building, a maid ran towards them in a hurry. When she saw Wei Haolan, her expression was filled with joy, but it was immediately covered with worry. She ran towards Wei Haolan and saluted her. Sect head. Wei Haolan noticed the anxiety in her tone, so she stopped and said to Mo Tiange, Fellow Taoist Yi, I won't be seeing you off. Please don't take offense. Emotienga understood what Wei Haolan meant. Sect head Wei, you don't have to be so polite. I'll go back now. Goodbye. The two of them nodded at each other, then Emotienga turned around and entered the courtyard. From afar, she could faintly hear the maid's voice. Sect head, another of our disciples is missing. Emotienga's heart skipped a beat, but she didn't stop and directly entered the VIP building. Once they saw her coming in, Yilu and Ichio both looked happy and rushed towards her. Senior Yi. Emotienga was astonished. What's wrong? The two of them looked very anxious just now, as if they'd been waiting for her to come back. Ichio turned around and picked up the Feifei from behind. I don't know what's going on, but Feifei hasn't been in high spirits today. Feifei was this Feifei's name. Ever since she received this Feifei, Yilu and Ichio asked her to name it. Emotienga didn't know how to name it, so since it was a Feifei, she'd just call it Feifei, just like how the Inferno Beast was called Xiaohua. Yilu and Ichio protested. How could she name it so casually? But their protests were useless. She was too lazy to give it another name, so she could only call it Feifei. Emotienga picked up the Feifei and looked at it. The originally lively little spiritual beast was now dispirited. Its eyes were half closed, and it didn't look like it was sleeping like the day she picked it up. Instead, it looked lethargic. After sensing it with her divine comprehension, she said, "It's all right. It's just that I didn't have time to take care of it these days. It's in a bad mood, so it's lethargic." Oh, Yilu and Ichio felt relieved, but at the same time, they were reluctant to part with it. I thought Senior couldn't take care of it while you were concocting pills, so we could continue to take care of it. It seems we have to return it to Senior. Emotienga smiled but didn't say anything. She picked up the Feifei, took the spiritual fruit Yilu gave her, and personally fed it. Feifei obviously didn't have much appetite and refused to eat. Seeing that it was still lethargic, Yilu and Ichio couldn't bear to tease it anymore, so they reluctantly returned it to Emotienga. When the two of them left, Emotienga specifically told them that she had to rest well and prepare to concoct pills the next day. Yilu and Ichio had already received instructions from the sect head, so they immediately said that they wouldn't let anyone disturb them. After the two of them left, Emotienga opened the formation in the house and entered the virtual sky world with Feifei in her arms. Once they entered the virtual sky world, Feifei, who was half dead a moment ago, suddenly opened its eyes wide. It jumped down from Emotienga's arms and threw itself into the small house. It rolled around on the praying mat, making woo-woo sounds and looking very happy. Emotienga couldn't help but laugh. She grabbed a praying mat from the side and sat down. She then reached out to pinch its round nose. You mischievous spirit, you actually wanted to come in, didn't you? A few days ago, she took Feifei into the virtual sky world once. Feifei was as happy as Xiaohua when it came in for the first time. Later, she was busy with concocting pills, so she left it to Yilu and Ichio to take care of. She didn't expect that this little guy would never forget about it, and even pretended to be sick. If it weren't for the contract between her and Feifei, she really would have been deceived by it. Speaking of which, were spiritual beasts more sensitive to the space inside the virtual sky world? Xiaohua was like this, and so was Feifei. Or could it be said that all living things were passed down from the distant past era to the present day? Humans gradually became more rational, while spiritual beasts retained their instincts. So they had the mark of the distant past era in their bodies? Because of that, they preferred the space from the distant past era, such as this virtual sky world. Feifei raised its head, arched its head next to her, grabbed her clothes with its teeth, and dragged her outside. Emotienga helplessly stood up and followed it. What are you doing? I let you in, so you should behave a little more, right? Although Feifei was intelligent, it was only a first-rank demonic beast. It was inferior to Xiaohua, who had lived in the virtual sky world for many years. Fortunately, she and Feifei had a contract, so she could roughly sense its mood. Emotienga saw it trotting along the ridge of field she opened. As it ran, it sniffed as if it was looking for something. Finally, Feifei stopped under a tree. It was a tree that was entirely yellow, different from ordinary trees. Its yellow color wasn't the yellow of a withered tree that had reached the limit of its life, and was about to shed its leaves. Instead, it was a kind of brilliant and colorful golden yellow that was about to be harvested. Its branches and leaves were lush and full of fruits. Emotienga knew this tree was called the flowerless golden tree, and the fruits it bore were called the flowerless golden fruit. It ripened once in 100 years, and its fruits would dry up after being picked. Its fruits and leaves could be used to concoct medicinal pills, but they were high-grade medicinal pills that Emotienga couldn't use right now. There were too many spiritual beasts like this in the virtual sky world, so she was too lazy to care about them. She just let the flowerless golden tree bear fruit, and the fruits fell to the ground and grew into small saplings. At that moment, Feifei circled around the tree, turned its head, and squeaked at Emotienga. Emotienga said, "This flowerless golden fruit can only be taken by cultivators above the nascent soul realm. You're only a first-rank spiritual beast now. What if your spiritual aura explodes after eating it?" Feifei widened its black eyes and glared at her for a while. It then bit the hem of her clothes and squeaked again. Emotienga sensed with her divine sense that Feifei seemed very sure this fruit was harmless to her. She thought for a moment then nodded. "All right, I'll let you eat one first. If there's nothing wrong, you can eat whatever you want in the future, as long as you don't eat it all up. But if there's something wrong, you're not allowed to touch these spiritual plants carelessly." Feifei raised its head and squeaked happily. It then circled around her left and right. Emotienga smiled, raised her hand, and gently picked one of the fruits. She then crouched down and held it in front of Feifei. "Here, be careful. The spiritual aura inside is very strong." "Woo-woo." Feifei snorted and bit the flowerless golden fruit. The flowerless golden fruit looked a bit like a plum, but its outer skin was golden. When Feifei bit it, the skin immediately broke, revealing the golden flesh inside. It hastily opened its mouth wide and swallowed the fruit in one gulp. It didn't even chew. In the end, it even stuck out its tongue and sucked all the juice that dripped down. Emotienga smelled a very fragrant aroma. This was a unique aroma. It wasn't as intoxicating as the aroma of flowers, nor was it as rich as the aroma of musk and the like. Instead, it was very sweet, carrying the aroma of earth and green leaves. This aroma quickly faded, but it still didn't disperse. It was as if the fur on Feifei's whole body carried this aroma. Feifei was very satisfied after eating the flowerless golden fruit. It lay on the ground, enjoying the gentle breeze, and even rolled around. However, its expression soon turned to one of pain. Emotienga immediately sensed it due to the connection between them. "Feifei." Emotienga looked down and saw that Feifei, who was enjoying itself a moment ago, was now enveloped by a golden aura. This was an extremely strong spiritual aura, even surpassing the spiritual pressure of a nascent soul cultivator. Emotienga was filled with regret. No matter how smart Feifei was, it was only a first-rank spiritual beast that hadn't grown up yet. How could it know that there were some things it could eat, and some things it couldn't? If she had known earlier, she wouldn't have let it eat indiscriminately. Chapter 207. Emotienga rushed back to the hut with Feifei in her arms. For a moment, she didn't know what to do. Feifei was only a small first-rank spiritual beast, so it definitely couldn't bear this spiritual aura. But how could she draw out this spiritual aura? A thought flashed through her mind, and Emotienga immediately made a decision. She took out several spirit stones and formation discs, and quickly laid a formation. This was a defensive formation called the dungeon formation, which was most suitable for defending against spiritual aura attacks. However, she made some modifications, hoping to suppress the spiritual aura inside Feifei's body and make it feel better. Then she pressed Feifei's head and probed its body with her spiritual aura to explore the situation inside Feifei's body. This golden aura didn't rebound her spiritual aura, but it was extremely tough and filled all of Feifei's meridians. No matter how Emotienga probed, she couldn't go deep inside. She could only barely enter the entrance of Feifei's meridians and couldn't go any further. After probing for a long time without any results, Emotienga had no choice but to let go. This spiritual aura had exceeded her current ability, so she couldn't do anything about it. In desperation, she could only hold Feifei and feed it healing and analgesic medicinal pills hoping it would feel better. Time passed bit by bit. At first, Feifei was rolling around in pain, but later on, it no longer had any strength. Its black eyes were wide open, filled with pain. However, Emotinga sensed that this spiritual aura was slowly fading away. Feifei's body seemed to be constantly being transformed, and its pain was also alleviated. Emotinga was shocked. Feifei, hold on. It seemed her animal instincts weren't wrong. This spiritual aura was indeed good for Feifei. Maybe it would be fine after it endured. Feifei whimpered and struggled against this power. Emotinga remembered her situation in the foundation building realm and said hurriedly, Feifei, maybe you're going to make a realm breakthrough. Don't fight against the spiritual aura, guide it. Although Feifei still couldn't understand her words, its divine comprehension could sense her meaning, so it quickly did as she said. Sure enough, the pain became lighter and lighter, and the spiritual aura flowed into Feifei's meridians. Emotinga breathed a sigh of relief. It's okay now. You just need to guide this spiritual aura well. The advancement of spirit beasts was different from that of humans. Their bodies seemed to possess the primordial memories, and they were naturally sensitive to the fusion of spiritual energy. Therefore, it was much easier for spirit beasts to advance compared to human cultivators. However, due to the lack of spiritual qi in this world, and the fact that very few cultivators could constantly feed their spirit beasts with pills, there were not many high-rank spirit beasts. Right now, Feifei had already extricated itself from the spiritual aura explosion state, and Emotinga also sensed that it was in the process of making a realm breakthrough, so she knew it could be said to be out of danger. A spirit beast's intuition was truly extraordinary. It was able to find a spirit herb that could help it advance after flying for a while. Back then, Xiaohu was also the same. When Emotinga raised it in the virtual sky world, it ate something that made it advance, and even changed its own ardent young real fire into sun real fire. He didn't know if Feifei would have a special ability after eating this flowerless golden fruit. However, she didn't have time to wait for Feifei to make a realm breakthrough. Bishuang Court was still waiting for her to concoct clear sky pills. Emotinga placed Feifei inside the dungeon formation, letting it make a realm breakthrough on its own, then meditated for a while. After she finished regulating her breath, she pondered for a moment, then tidied up her magic weapons and tools. She didn't know why, but the space between her eyebrows suddenly twitched when she thought about concocting medicinal pills. She put on the heaven and earth cloud silk armor and cloud treading boots, then put the white silk handkerchief, the shuttle of flying Apsara, the enchanting lantern, the land-fleeing ruler, and other things in an easily accessible place. After a moment of hesitation, she also put the 2 stone sculpture puppets into her Qianquan bag in case of emergencies. After she finished doing all this, it was almost time. Seeing that Feifei was doing well, she left the virtual sky world and let it make a realm breakthrough on its own. After all, a realm breakthrough wasn't a matter of 1 or 2 days. It might take more than half a year. Soon after she left the virtual sky world, Ichio called out from outside. Senior Yi, are you ready? She withdrew the defensive formation. She laid here, then walked out of the room. Ilu and Ichio were already waiting outside. All right, let's go. Yes. When she arrived at the concocting room, she saw that the 3 core formation elders were already waiting for her. Emotinga stepped forward to greet them. Greetings to the 3 seniors. The 3 of them nodded. Elder Chingy smiled and said, Little friend, Yi doesn't need to be overly courteous. We'll have to rely on you today. Emotinga smiled and cupped her hands in greeting. She no longer bothered with pleasantries, and went to check on the preparations. Fellow Taoist Yi. Xiaqing walked towards her. Emotinga was startled. Xiaqing looked exhausted. Her eyes were lifeless, and her voice was hoarse. Fellow Taoist Xia, what happened to you? Xiaqing rubbed her eyes and said, It's nothing. I'm just too tired. You're going to concoct medicinal pills today. Shouldn't you have rested well yesterday? Wei Haolan walked over from the side and said with a smile. Junior Marshal's sister Xia was busy preparing the materials for several days, but yesterday, she was too excited and couldn't enter a meditative state. In the end, she ended up like this. Emotinga was stunned. She thought only mortals would be like this. Even if cultivators were very excited, they could still enter a meditative state with a bit of restraint. In particular, Xia Qing was a foundation-building cultivator. Alas, she could only say that Xia Qing was too obsessed with concocting medicinal pills. Xia Qing said, "I can't calm down when I think about concocting clear sky pills. Forget it, I'll just observe today. I'll mainly watch fellow Taoist Yi concoct medicinal pills." Mo Tiange could only say, "In that case, fellow Taoist Xia can just watch from the side." Xia Qing nodded. She raised her spirits and continued to instruct the disciples. Wei Haolan came over and said, "Fellow Taoist Yi, take a look and see what's missing. If there's nothing else, we can start." Mo Tiange examined the prepared spiritual plants and pill furnace. After muttering to herself for a moment, she laid a simple spirit-gathering formation around the pill furnace and said, "Okay, we can start." Wei Haolan looked at her spirit-gathering formation, with a hint of surprise on her face. She then nodded, and went to invite the three elders. Fellow Taoist Xia. Upon hearing her voice, Xia Qing hastily came over. "Fellow Taoist Yi, is there something wrong? You can ask the unrelated people to leave. We're going to start concocting medicinal pills." Okay. Xia Qing was excited. She turned around and shouted at the part-time disciples, "That'll do. All of you can go out and wait outside. No matter what happens, you're not allowed to come in." Yes, it was rare for them to see a high-level core formation medicinal pill being concocted, but they couldn't just stand by and watch. These part-time disciples were reluctant to leave, but they didn't dare to disobey, so they left. Elder Qingxi then came over. "Little friend Yi, what should I do?" Mo Tiange said, "Senior, sit here. You only need to use your dantian real fire." Elder Qingxi nodded and sat cross-legged next to the pill furnace. Mo Tiange looked up and saw Elder Qingmiao sitting cross-legged on the side, while Elder Qingyi went to the door. She pulled Wei Haolan over and asked in a low voice, "Sect head Wei, what's Elder Qingyi doing?" Wei Haolan said, "The elders decided that Elder Qingyi will stand guard while the other two elders will take turns providing the concocting fire." "Oh." Mo Tiange nodded. "The elders are really thoughtful. It'd be best if there's an elder to stand guard at all times." In any case, 2 elders were enough to provide the concocting fire. Wei Haolan nodded. "Fellow Taoist Yi, you can start. I won't disturb you anymore." Mo Tiange turned around and said to Elder Qingxi, "Senior, let's start." Elder Qingxi clasped her palms together, operated her spiritual aura, and pushed her right palm horizontally. A wisp of spiritual aura gushed out from her palm, and immediately turned into dantian real fire, rushing towards the bottom of the furnace. A core formation cultivator's dantian real fire was many times better than the earth fire in this place, so the pill furnace almost immediately heated up. Mo Tiange opened the pill furnace and quickly threw several kinds of spiritual plants inside. She then closed the pill furnace and concentrated on sensing the situation of the spiritual plants inside with her divine sense. Several kinds of spiritual plants soon turned into liquid and mixed together, emitting a strong medicinal fragrance. Although the speed wasn't as fast as when she used sun real fire, it was still many times faster than when she used earth fire. In fact, if she used the purple wooden cauldron to concoct clear sky pills, she could probably finish concocting them in half a day, but she absolutely couldn't take out the purple wooden cauldron. Not to mention that it was a magic weapon used by a deification cultivator. Just the sunstone she sealed inside was already very precious. Inside the pill furnace, several kinds of medicinal liquids were undergoing drastic changes. Mo Tiange sat cross-legged with her eyes closed, but her divine sense never once relaxed, paying close attention to the changes inside the furnace. At this moment, Elder Qingyi was standing guard outside the door. All the part-time disciples had already been driven away, so there were only 5 people left inside the concocting room. Mo Tiange was paying close attention to the inside of the pill furnace. Elder Qingxi was concentrating on using her dantian real fire, while Elder Qingmiao, Wei Haolan, and Xia Qing were watching the concocting process without blinking. Time passed slowly. Elder Qingxi's complexion gradually turned pale. She had been using her dantian real fire for 6 hours, so she had already consumed a lot of her spiritual aura. Emotienga opened her eyes. Upon seeing this situation, she said, "Senior Qingmiao, please come and take Senior Qingxi's place." Upon hearing her voice, Elder Qingmiao stood up and walked over. She then sat next to Elder Qingxi and used her spiritual aura to force out her dantian real fire. In a split second, Elder Qingxi withdrew her dantian real fire. With Wei Haolan's support, she sat next to Elder Qingxi and began to meditate to recover her spiritual aura. Emotienga took a look. Elder Qingmiao's and Elder Qingxi's dantian real fires were almost the same. This was better than she expected. Although the difference wasn't big, the more stable the concocting fire was, the better it was. That way, there wouldn't be any uncontrollable changes to the spiritual medicines. Seniors, you can decide when to switch next. It's best if you don't use up all your spiritual aura before switching. That way, it'll be easier for you to recover. Elder Qingmiao nodded, then concentrated on sending her dantian real fire. Once she felt the materials inside the furnace were almost full, Emotienga opened the lid and put most of the materials inside. She then quickly closed the lid, sat on the side, and began to make hand seals. Soul-solidifying pills were relatively easy to concoct, but clear sky pills could definitely be considered high-grade medicinal pills, so they needed to be matched with mini hand seals. The incomparably complicated hand seals were made one after another, almost without any pause. They were like floating clouds and flowing water, causing Xia Qing, who was watching from the side, to widen her eyes. Such complicated hand seals required a very long time to practice. Xia Qing admitted she was still a bit lacking. She really didn't know how talented this fellow Taoist Yi was in pill concocting. She wasn't a concoctions master specializing in pill concocting, but she was even better than her. In fact, Emotienga also practiced. Her pill concocting talent was very ordinary, but she concocted a lot of medicinal pills. Moreover, all of them were high-grade medicinal pills, which was how she managed to practice making hand seals. She recalled seeing Qingxi's hand seal technique years ago. At that time, she was already gasping in amazement. It was only after she started concocting that she realized she still underestimated him. He had such exquisite hand seal technique, and he even memorized it after seeing it once. His pill concocting skills were much higher than hers, so how could an ordinary aura refining cultivator, who just built his foundation, possibly achieve this? She sighed inwardly, then closed her eyes, concentrating on sensing the condition of the concocting furnace. Chapter 208. She made several hand seals one after another, and spiritual aura, which was almost tangible, hit the pill furnace. The spiritual medicines inside the furnace began to change violently. Emotienga closed her eyes and used her divine sense to observe the medicinal liquid inside the furnace. Dozens of materials dissolved and fused. Because of the hand seals, the changes became more and more intense. This was the pill melting process. It would last for a long time, and when the changes stopped, it would be the moment the pills were formed. Therefore, in the next few days, she had to wait like this. From time to time, she would make hand seals to urge the materials to fuse and drain out the impurities. Time passed bit by bit. Elder Qingmiao and Elder Qingxi would take turns every 6 hours. Elder Qingyi had been guarding the door. Xia Qing was recording Emotienga's pill concocting steps and learning her hand seals, while Wei Haolan was assisting her. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, the materials inside the furnace were finally fused together smoothly. Emotienga wiped the sweat on her forehead and heaved a sigh of relief. However, she soon regained her full concentration and made several hand seals to form the pills. This was the last day. Whether she would succeed or fail would depend on this moment. The medicinal liquid inside the furnace began to slowly gather and solidify. "Who are you?" Elder Qingyi's shout was accompanied by a strange wave of energy fluctuations. The expressions of the 5 people inside the concocting room changed. This was the crucial moment of pill concocting. What happened? When that strange fluctuation became clearer and clearer, Emotienga was greatly shocked. She could already feel it. It was Ren Yufeng. When she arrived at Linhai, she didn't find any trace of Ren Yufeng. Nothing happened in the past 3 months, so Emo Tiange almost thought he was washed away by the waves. But now, Ren Yufeng appeared at this crucial moment. Nevertheless, she quickly calmed down. With 3 core formation cultivators here, Ren Yufeng wouldn't be able to gain any advantage. Although Elder Qingxi's spiritual aura was almost exhausted because she used her Dantian real fire, Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao were still in good condition. With 2 core formation elders here, Ren Yufeng's cultivation level was improper, so he definitely couldn't win. Elder Qingmiao, who was meditating, frowned and said seriously, "I'll go take a look. You two stay calm." "Yes," Wei Haolan and Xia Qing answered. The 2 of them consciously ran to the door just in case. Emo Tiange also calmed down and continued concocting. Miserable cries rang out from outside, followed by the sounds of fighting. "Are you a devil path cultivator?" Elder Qingyi shouted. Originally, she was just guessing, but upon hearing this voice, Emo Tiange was now certain that it was indeed Ren Yufeng. "What demonic cultivator? I'm the divine dragon's son." Ren Yufeng's tone was arrogant and conceited. "Son of the divine dragon?" Elder Qingyi's voice was filled with doubt. "Senior sister." Elder Qingmiao walked out of the concocting room and said, "What divine dragon's son? In my opinion, he's a cultivator from the devil path. He even injured our disciple, so there's no need to say anything. Just kill him." "Not bad," Elder Qingyi answered. "He's covered in devil aura, but he's still not a cultivator from the devil path. He actually injured our group's disciples. There's no need to be polite to him." "You!" Ren Yufeng was furious. "How dare you slander me? I am the son of the divine dragon. I am the son of the divine dragon." The fluctuation of spiritual energy was even more intense. Emo Tiange knew they must be fighting, so she said to Elder Qingxi, "Senior, let's speed up so we can finish refining faster. Please strengthen your real fire." Elder Qingxi, who also sensed the danger outside, nodded. "All right, I'll have to trouble little friend Yi." As she said that, she urged her spiritual aura, and the real fire in her Dantian immediately became a bit thicker. Emo Tiange was also rapidly making hand seals. Although she felt the 2 core formation cultivators could definitely stop Ren Yufeng, she still had to be prepared just in case. Suddenly strengthening the concocting fire would impact the medicinal liquid inside the pill furnace. Emo Tiange used hand seals to weaken the impact while speeding up the concoction of the medicinal pills. "Sect Head Wei, what's the situation outside?" Emo Tiange had no time to spread her divine sense while paying attention to the concoction of the pill furnace, so she had to ask Wei Haolan. Wei Haolan, who was standing at the door, stuck her head out to take a look. This devil cultivator is very strong in fights of magical power. But rest assured, fellow Taoist Yi, the 2 elders can handle him." "That's good." Emo Tiange felt a bit relieved. She also felt Ren Yufeng couldn't defeat the 2 elders, but she kept feeling the space between her eyebrows twitching. It wasn't a good sign. Yi Haolan said. Emo Tiange tilted her head. "What's wrong?" "It's Senior Martial Brother Shangguan," Yi Haolan said. "Senior Martial Brother Shangguan has reached the peak stage of the foundation building realm. I hope he can help the 2 elders." Emo Tiange wrinkled her brows when she heard what he said. Her intuition told her something was wrong. "Master, Martial Uncle Qingmiao, I've come to help you." This was fellow Taoist Shangguan's voice. "Yunhao, why did you come here instead of at the Tao Achieving Pagoda?" Elder Qingyi's voice sounded a bit strict. "Right, why did he happen to come here?" Shangguan Yunhao answered. "I just sensed a strange aura in the Tao Achieving Pagoda, so I followed it here." In front of a formidable enemy, Elder Qingyi couldn't blame him. She just said, "Then quickly come here." This devil cultivator's divine power is extraordinary, be careful. Although the peak stage of the foundation building realm was only a step away from the core formation realm, it was actually a lot weaker. Elder Qingyi really doted on this disciple. She was worried about him the moment he arrived, afraid he would get hurt. Senior Martial Sister Sect Head, Xia Qing asked in a low voice. "Where did this devil cultivator come from? Is there a flaw in our Bishuan Court's great sect protecting formation?" Wei Haolan wrinkled her brows. Correct. According to reason, we should have known the moment this devil cultivator entered our great sect protecting formation. How could he suddenly appear in the concocting room? Mo Tiange once heard Yi Lu and Yi Qiu say that the west side of Linhai was a branch of Demonic Mountain. Demonic Mountain not only had a towering main peak, but it also had many complicated branches. Those devil cultivators of the Path of Devil lived in these mountain ranges. The reason why Linhai cultivators didn't dare to go to Kunwu through Demonic Mountain was not only because they were afraid of running into high-level devil cultivators, but also because the terrain of these mountain ranges was peculiar. They basically couldn't jump over them. All these years, no devil cultivators had ever reached Linhai for the same reason. Sect head Wei, Mo Tiange said. This person is the enemy I told you about. He has a strange temperament and willfully kills innocent people. You must be careful. Since Ren Yufeng had already degenerated into a devil cultivator, his temperament must have also changed. During that year, Mo Tiange saw that he was irritable and capricious, so she knew he'd become a genuine devil cultivator. Wei Haolan's and Xia Qing's expressions changed at the same time. Although they knew about this matter, in the past few months, they didn't see any traces of devil cultivators, so they didn't take it seriously. They never expected that they'd actually come knocking on their door. Ah! A scream suddenly came from outside. Judging from the voice, it was Elder Qingyi. Wei Haolan was shocked. She looked outside and her expression changed. Senior Marshal Brother Shangguan. She didn't need to say anything because Elder Qingmiao's angry voice came from outside. Shangguan Yunhao, what are you doing? What am I doing? Shangguan Yunhao's voice also became gloomy. Of course I'm killing you. Everyone inside the concocting room was stunned. Elder Qingxi was even more shocked. Her hands trembled, and she coughed up a mouthful of blood. Elder Qingxi, Wei Haolan and Xia Qing's expressions changed as they rushed over. Mo Tiange couldn't help but sigh when she heard a muffled sound from inside the furnace. At the last moment, the concoction of the clear sky pill failed. But now wasn't the time to worry about this. She took out a healing medicinal pill from inside her robe and gave it to Wei Haolan. Quickly give this to Senior Qingxi. Also take a restorative panacea. Since Elder Qingyi was plotted against, she could only try her best to preserve Elder Qingxi's strength. Shangguan Yunhao. Although Elder Qingyi's voice was a bit weak, it was very fierce. The three of us have always treated you well. Why are you biting the hand that feeds you? Treated me well? Shangguan Yunhao's voice was polite and restrained before, but this time, it was full of ridicule. If you really treated me well, then why haven't I formed my gold core at 170 years old? It's not like you don't know about the lack of resources in Linhai, Elder Qingmiao said coldly. But ever since we accepted you as our disciple, you've always been the first to get medicinal pills. You've just built your foundation, but we already let you enter the Dao Achieving Pagoda. When you reached the peak stage of the foundation building realm, we always sent disciples to Kunwu to look for dustless pills. Bishuan Court is only a small cultivation group, but we've always treated you 10 times better than other disciples. Is there anything you're dissatisfied with? Dissatisfied? Of course I'm dissatisfied. Shangguan Yunhao let out a humph. He obviously didn't agree with Elder Qingmiao's statement. Correct. As soon as I entered the sect, you gave me pointers. As soon as I reached the 10th layer of the aura refining realm, you gave me foundation building pills. However, you treated me so well only because I was the disciple with the best aptitude Bishuan Court accepted in the past several hundred years. What happened after that? After I reached the peak stage of the foundation building realm, you delayed giving me dustless pills and didn't let me form my gold core. Just like that, you trapped me in the peak stage of the foundation building realm for 50 years. 50 years. 50 years ago, I asked you to let me go to Kunwu, so I could look for dustless pills or some fated chances on my own. But what did you do? You'd rather send disciples with no future to Kunwu than let me go out. Weren't you just afraid I wouldn't come back after I went to Kunwu? Because you were afraid you couldn't control me, you made me unable to form my gold core for 50 years. Upon hearing what he said, Wei Haolan's expression changed. She stood up and walked out of the concocting room. Shengguan Yunhao, check your conscience. The elders didn't let you go out because they were worried about your safety. We have so many martial sisters and junior sisters who always run around for your dustless pills. From the moment you entered the sect, did we ever ask you to do anything? No, not only did we not, but we also provided you with everything you needed for your cultivation. It's fine if you don't feel grateful, but you actually made a false accusation. Because of me. Shengguan Yunhao sneered. Wei Haolan, don't you feel guilty saying this? 40 years ago, the former sect head abdicated, and I wanted to be the sect head. With my qualifications and cultivation level, why did the position of sect head fall into your hands in the end? Moreover, you didn't even allow me to take a step out of the group. You imprisoned me in disguise. Shengguan Yunhao. Wei Haolan was furious. Our Bishuan court is a cultivation group for female cultivators. Every generation of sect heads has been a female cultivator. Is letting you be the sect head going to provoke others? Yes, that's it, Shengguan Yunhao said sarcastically. Just because I'm a male cultivator, you're always on guard against me. Don't think I don't know. In fact, you already got your hands on dustless pills a few years ago. You just didn't let me make a realm breakthrough smoothly. On guard against you? Elder Qingyi finally spoke. She coughed then continued to say, correct, I'm on guard against you. Elder Qingyi, Wei Haolan was bewildered. When you fought against Haolan for the position of sect head, I could already see your intentions weren't right. Therefore, at that time, I didn't let you go out and didn't immediately give you dustless pills. But why do you think I did that? If you didn't grind away your greed and didn't cultivate your mental state, you'd fall because of your inner demon if you wanted to form your gold core. Chapter 209. Mo Tiange walked over softly and looked outside through the crack in the door. There was blood on Elder Qingyi's chest, but she was still standing, and Elder Qingmiao was on guard beside her. Shengguan Yunhao, who was standing not too far away, looked resentful. Ren Yufeng, on the other hand, was watching their quarrel with interest as if it had nothing to do with him. Don't think I'll believe you. Shengguan Yunhao's face twisted. My heart is evil? You're clearly biased. Yes, we're biased. Elder Qingmiao stared at him with a sharp gaze. We're really blind to be biased towards a heartless and unscrupulous thing like you. Linhai is so short of resources, but we gave you a share of everything first. We didn't ask you to do anything, and only told you to focus on cultivating. But in the end we raised an ingrate. The three elders watched Shengguan Yunhao grow up. Now that Elder Qingmiao's gaze was sharp, his momentum weakened, and his eyes also started to shrink. Ren Yufeng chuckled softly. His devilish eyes swept over the female cultivators in front of him. If that's the case, why didn't they let you go to Kunwu? Upon hearing that, Shengguan Yunhao stuck out his chest again. Right. You obviously had no choice but to cultivate me for the sake of the group's future. You were afraid I wouldn't go back to Linhai after going to Kunwu, so you wanted me to be trapped in Linhai for the rest of my life. Nevertheless, Mo Tiange knew this reason. When she went to the Dao Achieving Pagoda to see the three elders a few days ago, she already heard from them that Bishuan court was short of talents, so they didn't dare to let their disciples with high aptitudes go out to gain experience. This wasn't the reason Shengguan Yunhao mentioned at all. This Shengguan Yunhao's heart was really evil. Did he think he could be flattered everywhere just because he had mutated spiritual roots? In Kunwu, every cultivation group indeed wanted to accept mutated spiritual roots, but if he thought he had mutated spiritual roots and relied on the group for everything, he'd only be looked down upon by others. Even if Bishuan court was short of resources, with the strength of a group, how bad could he be if he fully supported his cultivation? This was probably the best a small or medium-sized cultivation group in Kunwu could do. However, if it was a big cultivation group, even if they accepted disciples with mutated spiritual roots, they definitely wouldn't treat him as leniently as Bishuan court did. If his cultivation level couldn't meet the cultivation group's requirements, the number of spirit stones and medicinal pills he received would be reduced. If he failed to live up to expectations, no one could save him. That was why it was said that superior aptitude was a gift from the heavens. However, in the end, one still had to rely on one's own hard work. Those who relied on their outstanding aptitude to feel that everything was given to them by others would never be able to achieve the immortal Tao. Qingmiao, don't talk to him anymore. Elder Qingyi snorted in a low voice. This kind of heartless and unscrupulous thing always blames other people's fault if he can't obtain anything. He never thought that from the moment he entered the sect, everything he has today was given by us. Not bad. Elder Qingmiao's expression also became indifferent. She stared at Shangguan Yunhao with an indifferent gaze. Obviously, she didn't have the slightest bit of hope. Us three martial sisters are really failures. After more than 100 years, we only managed to teach this kind of thing. The conversation between the two elders made Shangguan Yunhao seethe with anger. Not only did you not repent, you even said that There were some people in this world who held grudges, but didn't remember kindness. They never thought about how much others had given them. Instead, they always thought about how much others could still give them. If they didn't give them everything they could, they would feel that others had let them down. Therefore, even if they wanted to show kindness, they still had to see who the person was. If some people treated them well, not only would they not feel grateful, but they would also think they were stupid. They would be delusional enough to want more from you. Otherwise, they would be letting them down. 1 liter of rice was a favor, but 1 bucket of rice was a grudge. This saying wasn't unreasonable. Shangguan Yunhao, Wei Haolan said coldly. Did you collude with this devil cultivator? Shangguan Yunhao's gaze was gloomy and cold. He didn't get the sect head's position, so he harbored intense hatred towards Wei Haolan. Yes, he promised to take me away from Lin Hai. I've long had enough. These days, some of our sect's disciples went missing from time to time. Was it him or you? So what if I did it? Shangguan Yunhao didn't feel guilty at all. It's not a pity for those idiots to die. It's better to give them to senior run for cultivation. It can also be considered recycling waste. Then there's nothing else to say. Wei Haolan waved her hand, summoning a bronze mirror. Elder Qingyi was ambushed because she wasn't on guard against you. Now I'll deal with you. I want to see how strong you, the number 1 foundation building disciple of Bishuan Court, are. Shangguan Yunhao's expression changed. You overestimate yourself. Wei Haolan, you stole my sect head's position, so today, I'll let you see my strength. As he said that, he also summoned his magic tool. Mo Tiange had never seen Wei Haolan fight, but now that she saw it, she actually wasn't weak at all. Elder Qingyi's gaze was cold as she watched the two of them fighting. This traitor thinks he's amazing. It's good to let Haolan teach him a lesson. We used to protect him, because we didn't want him to suffer any setbacks. Now it seems we were too lenient. Elder Qingmiao lowered her gaze and sighed. She then asked worriedly, Senior Martial Sister, are your injuries all right? They're fine. I won't die. Elder Qingyi lowered her hand that was covering her chest. Let's deal with the enemy first. All right. The two martial sisters shifted their gazes towards Ren Yufeng. Both of them summoned their magic weapons. Mo Tiange could see that although Wei Haolan's cultivation level wasn't as high as Shangguan Yunhao's, her fighting ability was very strong. She probably wouldn't lose to him. As for Elder Qingyi, she was a middle-stage core formation cultivator after all. Even if she was ambushed, how could a late-stage foundation-building cultivator possibly injure her? Therefore, her injuries weren't serious. Now that the two elders joined hands, Mo Tiange reckoned, she was still a bit stronger than Ren Yufeng. However, when she examined Ren Yufeng carefully, she discovered that the black aura on his body had become even denser. She then recalled what Shangguan Yunhao said about the missing Bishuan Court disciples. This Ren Yufeng had indeed embarked on the path of devil cultivators. He actually used human corpses to cultivate. Ren Yufeng was currently confronting Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao. All of a sudden, he cast a glance at the concocting room and said gloomily, Yi Xiaotian, Junior Martial Sister Yi, we haven't seen each other for several months. Why are you hiding? Since Ren Yufeng and Shangguan Yunhao were colluding, Mo Tiange didn't think she could hide her whereabouts from him. Although she had the temperament to put her own safety before things went awry, she couldn't learn to push the blame away and disregard other people's lives. Therefore, She boldly pushed open the door of the concocting room and walked out. Ren Yufeng, I'm right here. Do you have any advice for me? When Ren Yufeng called her junior martial sister, bewilderment flitted across Elder Qingyi's and Elder Qingmiao's faces. However, when they saw that Mo Tiange was full of vigilance towards Ren Yufeng, their expressions finally relaxed. I wouldn't dare to advise you. Ren Yufeng stared at her with a smile on his face. However, his whole body was now covered in devil aura, so his smile looked even more terrifying. I really didn't expect this. I couldn't find you back then, and thought you escaped with Jiang Shuihan and the others. As it turns out, you actually came to the Eastern Sea with me. Could it be that you've been hiding in the underground palace for a whole year? Correct. It wasn't a big deal to say this out loud. Ren Yufeng, I've been hiding in the underground palace for a whole year. But you didn't notice me at all. Junior martial sister Yi deserves to be the brilliant disciple of a nascent soul lord Taoist from Xianqing School. Ren Yufeng's expression twisted. He thought he'd obtained power, but in the end, he was fooled by a foundation-building cultivator. The anger in his heart could be imagined. But today, don't even think about escaping. Mo Tiange sneered. I'll return those words to you. You're sinister, cunning, and harboring evil intentions. As an elite disciple of Zhengfa sect, you used your fellow disciple to burn the bridge after crossing the river. You even schemed everywhere and wanted to kill me to silence me. Yi Xiaotian, I'm not a weak woman who can be bullied and won't fight back. Since you schemed against me, I'll give you a tooth for a tooth. Ha 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 ha. Ren Yufeng threw his head back and laughed. Once he finished laughing, he said with a gloomy expression, What I hate the most is you so-called proud sons of heaven, who look down on others, because you think your aptitudes are high. You want to kill me? What a joke. A mere foundation-building cultivator also wants to kill me. Mo Tiange ignored his mockery. She turned towards Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao and said, Seniors, does what sect head Wei promised me still count? When Wei Haolan asked her to teach Xia Qing pill concocting, one of her conditions was to ensure her safety. Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao already knew this devil cultivator was a deranged person. Even if they stayed out of this matter, this devil cultivator and Bishuan court would never forgive each other. Besides, that missing disciple was also because of this devil cultivator, so the hatred between them had long been formed. Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao immediately said to Mo Tiange, Rest assured, little friend Yi. Since we promised, we naturally keep our word. As they spoke, Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao stepped forward. Humph. Ren Yufeng let out a cold, humph, and cast a glance at Mo Tiange. I'll deal with these two old women first, then I'll deal with you. Arrogant. Elder Qingyi shouted in response to those words. Even though devil cultivators were slightly stronger than righteous path cultivators in fights of magical power, Ren Yufeng was only an early-stage core formation cultivator. Elder Qingyi was in the middle stage of the core formation realm, while Elder Qingmiao was in the early stage of the core formation realm. There was absolutely no reason for them to lose when it was 2 against 1. Whether I'm arrogant or not, I'll show you. With a ferocious expression, Ren Yufeng formed an art with both hands. In an instant, a sphere formed from black devil aura appeared in front of his chest. Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao didn't dare to be careless. Each of them released a protective spiritual light and summoned their magic weapons. Elder Qingyi's weapon was a jade bottle with a willow branch stuck in it. She picked up the willow branch and brushed it, spilling several drops of sweet dew. The spiritual aura in front of them flickered, forming a spiritual aura net that blocked in front of Ren Yufeng. At that moment, Ren Yufeng's devil aura ball was already spinning crazily. He let out a cold humph and swept his gaze over everyone in front of him contemptuously. He then pushed the devil aura ball forward. Boom! The spiritual aura net formed by Elder Qingyi's magic weapon blocked the devil aura ball. But an extremely strong spiritual aura fluctuation burst out from it. Ah! 2 screams rang out. They didn't come from Elder Qingyi or Elder Qingmiao, but from Wei Haolan and Shangguan Yunhao, who were fighting on the side. Mo Tiange was smart enough to hide behind the 2 elders, so she wasn't affected by the fight. Haolan. Upon seeing that Wei Haolan was sent flying, Elder Qingmiao swung the golden rope in her hand, bound Wei Haolan and pulled her back. Shangguan Yunhao, on the other hand, didn't have such good luck. He fell heavily on the ground, spitting out a mouthful of blood. He then pointed at Ren Yufeng. "Senior! Ren Yu!" Ren Yufeng looked at him as if he was looking at an ant. His eyes were filled with contempt. "Since you're useless, you can go die." Anger emerged on Shangguan Yunhao's face. "You didn't keep your promise." "Humph." Ren Yufeng cast him a cold glance and only said one word. "Naive." Shangguan Yunhao's eyes widened. His face was filled with unwillingness, but in the end, he still breathed his last. Emo Tienga stared at his corpse without the slightest trace of pity. She didn't sympathize with people who couldn't see their own position, and only knew how to endlessly demand things. Chapter 210. Ren Yufeng had long known Shangguan Yunhao would end up like this. What he hated the most was talented cultivation group disciples, but Shangguan Yunhao just happened to have this kind of temperament. How could he possibly sincerely cooperate with Shangguan Yunhao? Not only did he have no self-awareness, but he was also as stupid as a pig. Shangguan Yunhao didn't feel wronged at all for falling into such a situation. However, a trace of sadness flitted across Elder Qingyi's and Elder Qingmiao's faces when they saw his corpse. He was, after all, the disciple they cultivated for more than 100 years. How could they remain indifferent upon seeing him die in someone else's hands? Ren Yufeng stared at the female cultivators in front of him and smiled gloomily. "He's dead, so it's your turn now." Elder Qingmiao pushed Wei Haolan to Emo Tienga, then swung the golden rope in her hand and sneered. "Who knows whose turn it will be? Then let's try." Ren Yufeng used his devil aura again. Seeing that they were fighting again, Emo Tienga helped Wei Haolan to a corner. "Sect Headway, are you alright?" Wei Haolan coughed up a mouthful of blood and said with difficulty, "Don't talk first." Emo Tienga took out a healing medicinal pill and fed it to her. "There are 2 elders here, so you should heal first." Wei Haolan nodded, swallowed the medicinal pill, then sat down cross-legged without saying anything. Emo Tienga looked up and saw Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao fighting with Ren Yufeng. In the current situation, although Ren Yufeng was strong, Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao weren't at a disadvantage. Moreover, they had a good tacit understanding with each other, so their chances of winning were relatively high. However, Emo Tienga felt something was wrong. Ren Yufeng was too confident. He might have colluded with Shangguan Yunhao in the beginning, but he obviously didn't take Shangguan Yunhao seriously at all. He probably just wanted to learn about Bishuan Court's situation from Shangguan Yunhao, and use him to crack Bishuan Court's restrictions and formations. Then the question was, where did his confidence come from? Emo Tienga couldn't figure it out. Nevertheless, she was never the type to sit and wait for death. After she felt something was wrong, she took out a simple formation and laid a 4 symbols 100 flowers formation around her. After that, she placed several magic weapons and magic tools in the most accessible places. She also held the magic talismans Lord Taoist Jinghe prepared for her in her hands. Soon after, she carefully observed the situation of their fight of magical power. If there was a life-threatening moment, she planned to directly enter the virtual sky world. Although she had a lot of treasures with her, the gap between the core formation realm and the foundation building realm was too big. If Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao couldn't hold on, she would have no choice but to save her own life first. Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao cooperated very well. Elder Qingyi's jade bottle focused on defense, while Elder Qingmiao's golden rope focused on offense. One of them attacked while the other defended, and one advanced while the other retreated. Their teamwork was flawless. Ren Yufeng couldn't gain the slightest bit of advantage, so he immediately looked impatient. After fighting for a while, Ren Yufeng finally couldn't endure it anymore. He used a wisp of devil aura to block Elder Qingmiao's attack and said coldly, "These 2 old women are quite skilled. It seems I'll have to use my trump card." She guessed Ren Yufeng definitely had something to rely on, but she didn't know what kind of cultivation technique he practiced in the end. Just like before, Elder Qingyi sprayed her willow branch with a layer of spiritual fog, which then turned into a protective spiritual light. Ren Yufeng sneered, A grain of light dares to compete with the sun and the moon? I'll show you what I can do. Right after he finished speaking, he made a series of hand seals with both hands. A wisp of pure devil aura filled his whole body in an instant, moving around his whole body. This devil aura was unusual. Mo Tiange stared at Ren Yufeng and saw that his momentum suddenly changed. It was as if his cultivation level suddenly rose sharply. However, she wasn't a core formation cultivator, so she couldn't see which stage Ren Yufeng's cultivation level had risen to. Qingmiao Black Tortoise Shield. Elder Qingyi reacted very quickly and immediately shouted. Elder Qingmiao immediately took out an extremely small shield-like magic weapon. With a wave of her hand, the shield flew into the air and expanded in an instant. Ren Yufeng stared coldly at the scene in front of him. Overestimating yourself. When Mo Tiange saw his expression, she instinctively took out the white silk handkerchief, which turned into a brick wall in front of her. Ren Yufeng attacked. The devil ball was thrown again, but this time, its momentum was much stronger than before. With a loud boom, the devil aura collided with Elder Qingyi's spiritual fog and Elder Qingmiao's black tortoise shield. Mo Tiange felt dizzy. Her whole body flew backwards and fell against the wall uncontrollably. After a while, she struggled to crawl up. There was a deep fear in her eyes. This momentum definitely wasn't that of an early-stage core formation cultivator. Apparently, Ren Yufeng must have cultivated some kind of secret technique in the past few months to have this kind of ability. If she hadn't laid the 4 symbols 100 flowers formation and had the white silk handkerchief in front of her, she definitely wouldn't have just suffered some minor injuries. She'd most likely have lost her life just like that. Ever since she obtained the white silk handkerchief, Mo Tiange had faced 5th-ranked demonic beasts before, but she'd never suffered such heavy injuries after blocking them. Cough. She wasn't the only one who suffered heavy injuries. Behind her, Wei Haolan, who was already heavily injured, now tilted her head and lost consciousness. Mo Tiange turned around and saw that Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao were still standing. However, one of them was still in a state of shock because her magic weapon had been shattered, while the other one was already injured, so she was now vomiting a mouthful of blood, and her complexion was deathly pale. You! Elder Qingyi stared at Ren Yufeng in front of her. What kind of sorcery is this? Ren Yufeng looked at the scene in front of him with satisfaction, and walked forward step by step. Who told you it was a devil path spell? I'm the son of the divine dragon. This is a divine dragon secret technique. Divine dragon secret technique? Elder Qingmiao regained her senses and glared at him. Your whole body is covered in devil aura, yet you still dare to say you're the son of the divine dragon? Shameless. You! Ren Yufeng raised his hand again, his face full of anger. Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao were on guard at the same time. Their defensive magic weapons were shattered, and they weren't rich cultivators, so they could only reluctantly take out defensive talismans. Ren Yufeng didn't use devil aura to attack like before. Instead, he smiled strangely. It'd be a pity if I didn't let you experience it. Experience what? Before Mo Tiange could guess what he meant, Ren Yufeng stretched out his hand and shouted, Rise! In an instant, Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao turned pale with fright. The remaining devil aura around their bodies suddenly surged as if it was alive. The devil aura slowly swam towards them and twined around their bodies. Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao were astonished. They took a step back, but the devil aura took a step forward. They wanted to use their spiritual aura to force the devil aura away, but the devil aura easily penetrated their defenses. Senior martial sister. Elder Qingmiao was a bit flustered. Although Elder Qingyi was a bit calmer, her injuries were much more serious, so she couldn't do what she wanted. The devil aura was getting closer and closer, almost invading their bodies. They could already feel the strangeness of this devil aura. It was gloomy, cold, lifeless, and it made their blood run cold. Senior martial sister, what's this? Elder Qingyi's complexion was pale, but her eyes were filled with shock. This is dead aura, dead aura. I know. Dead aura? Mo Tiange was stunned. There was also some black aura around her body, and now she was also moving towards her. Yes, this person cultivates dead aura. It absorbs the dead aura of dead people. No wonder there were always disciples missing these days. They were probably used to cultivate this evil technique. Elder Qingmiao also knew what dead aura was, so her complexion instantly turned pale. Dead aura was actually a kind of special spiritual aura. Mortals called life aura yang aura and dead aura yin aura. But in fact, the cultivation world didn't think so. Life aura had both yin and yang, and most people's life auras revolved around yin and yang. However, dead aura was different. It was neither part of the 5 elements nor outside of yin and yang. Therefore, people couldn't come into contact with dead aura. Once they came into contact with dead aura, they would slowly be corroded and eventually lose their lives, becoming dead people. As the name implied, dead aura was the aura that could only exist in dead people. Nowadays, the righteous path and the devil path had been separated for too long, so no one knew whether the devil path could cultivate dead aura or not. However, they knew it was absolutely impossible for the righteous path to cultivate dead aura. Senior Martial Sister, Elder Qingmiao was a bit panicked. What should we do? Elder Qingyi wasn't much better than her, but she was a bit calmer now. After thinking about it, she clenched her teeth and said, "Dante on real fire. Dead aura is afraid of fire." However, Ren Yufeng was still in front of them. How could they find the time to refine the dead aura, invading their bodies? Senior Martial Sisters. Unexpectedly, Elder Qingxi came out. Her complexion was pale and her body was floating. Obviously, her spiritual aura hadn't recovered yet. "I'll stop him." Junior Martial Sister Qingxi. Elder Qingxi didn't say anything. A flower basket appeared in her hands. The fresh flowers in the basket looked like they were just plucked. Their fragrance assailed everyone's nostrils. Ren Yufeng didn't take Elder Qingxi seriously at all. He sneered and devil aura started to wander around his fingers. With a heavy expression, Elder Qingxi put her hand into the flower basket and sprinkled a handful of petals. These petals were obviously light, but they carried raging spiritual aura as they drifted towards Ren Yufeng's face. With a sullen expression, Ren Yufeng raised his hand and devil aura gathered between his fingers. As soon as the petals came into contact with the devil aura, they were unexpectedly corroded and turned black in an instant. Elder Qingxi's expression changed. "You! Ha 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 ha!" Ren Yufeng threw his head back and laughed. "You overestimate yourself." He waved his sleeve, causing a gust of black aura to rush out and wrap around Elder Qingxi. "Ah!" Elder Qingxi cried out in pain, and the flower basket in her hands fell to the ground. Upon seeing this, Mo Tiange steeled her heart and pointed at the space between her eyebrows. If the 3 elders couldn't stop him, she'd lose her life in vain, so she'd better escape into the virtual sky world to hide for a while. The bead between her eyebrows shone. She chanted an incantation and shot out a spiritual aura. In an instant, she was submerged by the light. The light soon dispersed. Mo Tiange thought she was already inside the virtual sky world, but the next moment she was shocked. She was still in the same place. She didn't enter the virtual sky world. What was wrong with her? Mo Tiange's face was deathly pale. She pointed at the space between her eyebrows again and summoned the bead. The bead was still shining, but after she cast the incantation, there was still no reaction. She suddenly panicked. Why couldn't she enter the virtual sky world? This was her last life-saving method. What could she do if she couldn't enter? Suddenly, she felt pain in her arm. She looked down and saw the faintly discernible dead aura wrapped around it. Dead aura! This dead aura destroyed her body of origin, so her body couldn't form a primal chaos. So she couldn't open the virtual sky world. But now, the 3 elders obviously couldn't hold on anymore. With Ren Yufeng's current twisted personality, he definitely wouldn't spare her life. What should I do? What should I do? Mo Tiange broke out in a cold sweat as she watched the scene before her. Chapter 211. Mo Tiange never cared about relying on the virtual sky world. Since she was lucky enough to obtain a unique treasure like the virtual sky world, and others couldn't take it away, she naturally had to make the best use of it. All along, with this backing, she had less apprehension when she was in danger compared to others. But she never expected that one day, she wouldn't be able to enter the virtual sky world. Emotianga broke out in a cold sweat as she watched Elder Qingxi being entangled by the dead aura. If she didn't have the virtual sky world, she would have to think of another way to escape. But given the current situation, she definitely couldn't defeat Ren Yufeng. Senior Martial Sister. Xia Qing staggered out of the concocting room with bloodstains on her chest. Apparently, she was also injured by the spiritual aura fluctuations from their fight of magical powers just now. Wei Haolan had already fainted. She was injured by the spiritual aura fluctuations twice in a row. The first time, she bore the brunt. The second time, she was protected by the 4 symbols 100 flowers formation, which weakened the spiritual aura pressure around her. Emotianga also happened to summon the white silk handkerchief. Otherwise, she might have already lost her life. Emotianga looked up, anxiously watching the scene in front of her. Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao were seriously injured and entangled by the dead aura. Elder Qingxi was now fighting Ren Yufeng alone, and was already at a disadvantage. Ren Yufeng seemed to be enjoying the pleasure of a cat teasing a mouse. He could obviously defeat Elder Qingxi very quickly, but he still took his time and watched as Elder Qingxi struggled to support herself. His eyes were filled with cruel pleasure. Senior Martial Sisters. Elder Qingxi suddenly shouted with a resolute expression on her face. Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao looked up and saw Elder Qingxi throwing away her flower basket magic weapon. She folded her palms and forced out a bright spiritual light from her body. She shouted, "Take them away." Emotianga still didn't understand what was going on, but she saw Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao's faces filled with pain. Junior Martial Sister. Elder Qingxi looked cold and solemn, her gaze resolute. Obviously, she had made up her mind. The spiritual light on her body became brighter and brighter, almost making people unable to open their eyes. Ren Yufeng looked up and laughed. "You want to detonate your gold core? Naive." A strange smile appeared on Elder Qingxi's face. "Really?" Before Ren Yufeng could figure out what was going on, he saw the spiritual light suddenly explode, enveloping his whole body. Even his dead aura was firmly entangled. Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao made a prompt decision and shouted, "Let's go!" After saying that, they each grabbed a disciple and quickly fled outside. The people they captured were naturally Wei Haolan and Xia Qing. After all, Emotianga was an outsider. Nevertheless, Emotianga seized this moment to launch the land-fleeing ruler. This land-fleeing ruler was something Emotianga conveniently stole from Yunwu Sect's sect head hall when she fled from Yunwu Sect. At the same time, he also gave her the Heaven and Earth Cloud Silk Armor. These two things were useless to Qin Shi, so he casually gave them to her. The land-fleeing ruler could travel hundreds or thousands of miles at any time. Emotianga very rarely used it. First, she didn't need to run when facing foundation-building cultivators, but when facing cultivators in the core formation realm or above, several hundred to 500 kilometers wasn't a long distance. Second, she didn't know where she would end up, and she might end up in a dangerous place. Third, it consumed too much spiritual aura and was very difficult to activate, so she might as well directly enter the virtual sky world. But in today's situation, she had no choice but to use it. She couldn't enter the virtual sky world, but her spiritual aura was still intact, and she was inside Bishuan Court's territory, so there shouldn't be any danger nearby. Even if there was danger, it wouldn't be as dangerous as Ren Yufeng. The land-fleeing ruler was successfully launched. The light dispersed and Emotianga opened her eyes. The floating pagoda in front of her was actually the Dao-achieving pagoda. Although Bishuan Court occupied a vast area, if she traveled more than 500 kilometers, she should have left the sect. Apparently, she only traveled several hundred kilometers this time. Time was tight, so Emotianga was just about to escape when she suddenly paused and turned to look at the direction she came from. She saw Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao, each holding Wei Haolan and Xia Qing, flying towards her. Upon seeing Emotianga standing there, the two elders were both startled. "Little friendy, how did you?" The flying speed of a core formation cultivator was already astonishing. Just a moment ago, Emotianga was still left behind by them. So how did she end up here in a flash? Without waiting for her to answer, Elder Qingyi said, "There's no time. We'll talk inside." Elder Qingmiao nodded. The two of them made hand seals to open the transporting formation in the pagoda. Elder Qingyi turned towards Emo Tienga and said, "Little friend Yi, since you also escaped, you might as well enter the pagoda to hide." Emo Tienga was thinking that no matter how fast her flying speed was, she wouldn't be faster than Ren Yufeng, so she immediately nodded. "Thank you, elders." The five of them stepped onto the transporting formation. With a flash of light, they entered the pagoda. Elder Qingmiao hesitated for a moment, then said, "What about the other disciples?" Elder Qingyi's gaze was filled with sorrow. She shook her head and said, "It's too late. Their flying speed is too slow. By the time they enter the pagoda, that devil cultivator would have already caught up." Upon hearing that, Elder Qingmiao clenched her teeth. She then raised her palm, condensed a spiritual light, and closed the transporting formation. When the transporting formation was closed, the two elders put the two juniors down and smiled bitterly at each other. Closing the transporting formation was tantamount to giving up on more than 1,000 Bishuan court disciples. Xia Qing looked up and asked anxiously, "Martial uncles, where's Martial Uncle Qingxi?" Upon hearing her question, Elder Qingmiao sighed and said with a gloomy expression, "Your martial uncle Qingxi used a blood-forbidden secret technique to entangle that devil cultivator. She definitely won't survive." Xia Qing was dumbfounded. Then can she kill that devil cultivator?" Elder Qingyi shook her head. "That devil cultivator's divine power is treacherous, and he also has dead aura. I'm afraid your martial uncle Qingxi can only entangle him for a while. She won't be able to kill him." Xia Qing bit her lip. "If that's the case, then our Bishuan court." Elder Qingyi closed her eyes. Her voice trembled as she said, "We can't. Those disciples, it'll depend on their luck." Elder Qingmiao heaved a deep sigh. Her gaze was bleak. "I'm afraid Bishuan court's several thousand years of foundation will be destroyed in our hands." After a long period of silence, Elder Qingyi finally showed a determined expression. "All right, let's heal our injuries first. We can rebuild the group after it's destroyed." Elder Qingmiao was silent for a while, then nodded. "Senior martial sister is right. We can't let junior martial sister Qingxi's sacrifice be in vain." Wei Haolan's injuries were very serious, and the two elders' injuries weren't light either. Only Xia Qing's injuries were relatively light. The five of them went up to the third floor. Elder Qingyi looked at the silent Emo Tienga behind them and said, "Little friend Yi, as you can see, we're old, weak, sick, and disabled right now, so we can't take care of you. You can do as you please. It'll be fine as long as you don't touch the restrictions in this pagoda." Emo Tienga hesitated for a moment, then asked, "Senior Qingyi, is this pagoda safe?" "This pagoda was built by the founder of my group, Primordial Lady Bishui. It's covered in layers of restrictions that even nascent soul cultivators can't break through. That devil cultivator's cultivation level is only in the core formation realm, so I reckon she won't be able to do anything." Emo Tienga felt a bit relieved, but when she thought about the countless Bishuan court disciples outside, she also sighed. Although she always cared about her own safety, thousands of people might die just like that. It wasn't a happy thing after all. In particular, Ren Yufeng came to Linhai together with her. After thinking for a moment, she took out the jade bottle inside her robe. "Seniors, this is a secret healing medicine my master gave me before I left. Perhaps it'll be helpful to you. Since you allowed me to enter the pagoda to hide, consider it my repayment." Elder Qingyi nodded and accepted it. "Thank you." With a formidable enemy in front of them, everyone else had no other thoughts. Aside from Xia Qing, who was looking after Wei Haolan, everyone else went off to treat their injuries. Emo Tienga's injuries weren't light either. Most importantly, her body carried dead aura. If she couldn't get rid of the dead aura, she wouldn't be able to enter the virtual sky world. Just thinking about this gave her a headache. She had no choice but to find a corner to treat her injuries. Since the two elders understood dead aura, they might have a way, so she could only treat her injuries first. Before long, spiritual aura fluctuations came from the transporting formation. Emo Tienga opened her eyes and was shocked. Xia Qing called out, "Senior Martial Brother Tang? Why are you here? The person who appeared on the transporting formation was Tang Shen. He also looked at everyone in front of him with surprise. Shen, Elder Qingyi called out. Have you been here all this time? Tang Shen nodded. Great-grandmother said I wasn't sensible last time. So she told me to face the wall for a month. Last time, he must have been asking Emotinga to leave with her. Seeing that all of them were injured, Tang Shen was a bit panicked. Elders, what's wrong? Elder Qingmiao sighed and said, Shen, this is also your luck. At least your great-grandmother's sacrifice wasn't in vain. Tang Shen was dumbfounded. Elder, you mean? Xia Qing rubbed her eyes and said in a low voice, Senior Marshal Brother Tang. When we were concocting medicinal pills, Senior Marshal Brother Shangguan colluded with the devil cultivator and injured 3 elders. To help us escape, Elder Qingxi used the blood prohibition secret technique. Tang Shen felt as if he was struck by lightning. The blood prohibition secret technique. Xia Qing wiped her tears and nodded while sobbing. That devil cultivator was really powerful. We could only hide in the pagoda. Right now, Senior Marshal's sister sect head is seriously injured, and the 2 elders aren't much better off. We can't take care of the other disciples. These few sentences made Tang Shen understand the current situation. His face turned deathly pale. How could this be? Just a moment ago, he was still Elder Qingxi's beloved grandson, and Bishuan Court was still the biggest cultivation group in Linhai. All of a sudden, he lost his great-grandmother, and the group was facing an unprecedented disaster. Then what about my mother? What about aunts and the others? And Anne? Elder Qingyi heaved a long sigh. Shen, you have to restrain your decline and adapt to the changes. We really can't take care of the other disciples. Your great-grandmother used the blood prohibition secret technique, but I'm afraid she can only hold that devil cultivator for a while. We simply don't have time to disperse the disciples, Xia Qing said in a low voice. Just now, the 2 elders already told the disciples to scatter and flee for their lives. Now it all depends on each person's luck. Tang Shen couldn't stand steadily and fell to the ground. They. Before Tang Shen could finish speaking, a voice rang out from outside. 2 old women, why don't you care about your disciples? Do you think I won't be able to do anything if you hide in the pagoda? Emotinga's expression changed. She stood up then walked towards the small window on the edge of the pagoda. She saw Ren Yufeng shrouded in black aura from head to toe. His aura was monstrous. Won't come out. I'll kill all your disciples. Elder Qingyi shook her head. No need to care about him. If we go out, we'll just be throwing our lives away in vain. Ren Yufeng was still shouting outside. What's wrong? Don't you want to come out and see your junior marshal sister? She wanted to kill me, so I killed her and even dismembered her body. Ha 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 ha. Tang Shen was greatly shaken. Trembling, he ran over. Through the window, he saw a head in Ren Yufeng's hand. It was Elder Qingxi. Great-grandmother. Tang Shen called out. He closed his eyes then fell to the ground with a plop. Fellow Taoist Tang. Chapter 212. Emotinga silently sat in the corner to heal herself. It had been 3 days since they escaped into the pagoda. Wei Haolan had already woken up, but her injuries were too severe, so she was still in a coma from time to time. The 2 elders' injuries hadn't healed yet, so they were seizing the time to resist the invasion of the dead aura. Xia Qing stared at Wei Haolan. Tang Shen shrank in the corner with a lifeless expression. Outside, Ren Yufeng had already tried all kinds of methods, but sure enough, he couldn't break the Dao Achieving Pagoda's restrictions. In the beginning, he still shouted for Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao to come out. Occasionally, he caught 1 or 2 Bishuan court disciples and tortured them to stimulate the people inside the pagoda. However, Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao weren't impulsive people. They were old and shrewd, seeing that they were seriously injured, and that if they went out, not only would they not be able to save these disciples, but they would also implicate everyone inside the pagoda. They hardened their hearts and pretended not to hear anything. Because of that, Ren Yufeng also felt bored and didn't feel like talking anymore. Later on, he went somewhere unknown. However, they weren't sure they could defeat Ren Yufeng, so they didn't dare to go out of the pagoda. Who knew whether Ren Yufeng was outside or not? Emo Tienga opened her eyes. She frowned when she saw the dead aura still wrapped around her body. Her injuries weren't too serious. Her meridians had passed through the 5 spirits cultivating body. And she also had the 4 symbols 100 flowers formation, and the white silk handkerchief to block the impact. Presumably, her injuries would be healed in a month. However, the dead aura in front of her made her feel very helpless. This dead aura not only couldn't be dissolved by her spiritual aura, but it also invaded her meridians. She already felt half of her arm go numb. But there was nothing she could do. Little friendy. Upon hearing the voice, Emo Tienga looked up and saw that Elder Chingy had stopped healing and was looking at her. Senior, Elder Chingy said, this devil cultivator must be the enemy little friendy talked about, right? I didn't ask in detail before, so can you tell me now? What's his origin, and what kind of grudge he has against you? Emo Tienga paused for a moment then said honestly, since Senior asked, I'll tell you in detail. About several months ago, I traveled to the northernmost glaciers and happened to run into an old friend. He's now a disciple of Zhengfa sect. The two of us met again, and he invited me to explore a secret place. Aside from things like the virtual sky world and other secrets related to her life-saving method, Emo Tienga told him everything. She didn't want to divulge things like the secret of the land of hiding dragon. She didn't go into detail about the treasures in the underground palace. Elder Chingy had rich experience. Since Emo Tienga didn't want to talk about these trivial details, she also didn't ask. The underwater palace suddenly collapsed. I thought I was going to lose my life, but when I woke up, I found myself in Linhai. Emo Tienga shook her head and smiled bitterly. Senior asked me what kind of enmity I have with him. In fact, what kind of enmity do I have with him? It's just that this person has bad intentions. I just happened to escape, so he wants to kill me to silence me. I see. Elder Chingy nodded slightly. In that case, little friend, you can't be blamed. Emo Tienga knew that before she explained everything clearly, the two elders must have had a knot in their hearts and suspected that she was the one who attracted this malefic star. Therefore, she explained everything in detail, including the names of people and places. She did this to make the two elders understand that Ren Yufeng didn't come to Bishuan Court to kill her. The reason Bishuan Court faced this sect extermination disaster was because they were very unlucky to run into Ren Yufeng, thus provoking this disaster. Emo Tienga breathed a sigh of relief when she heard what Elder Chingy said. It was fine as long as the two elders didn't blame her. Ren Yufeng was outside now, so if she offended the two elders, she'd be in danger. I never expected this person to be a disciple of Zhengfa sect. A dignified disciple of a famous sect actually embarked on the path of a devil cultivator. Elder Qingmiao also stopped treating her injuries and opened her eyes. Emo Tienga said, this person entered a demonic barrier from the very beginning, so he easily became a devil cultivator. How could it be so easy to directly advance from the foundation building realm to the core formation realm? In my opinion, this so-called divine dragon secret technique of his must have some flaws. You're right. Elder Chingy nodded. I also know a little about devil path cultivation techniques. Although devil path cultivation techniques advance faster than our righteous path cultivation techniques, they can't be achieved overnight like this. This person must have cultivated some kind of evil technique, but I can't see any disadvantages for now. In fact, one of the disadvantages is already very obvious. Elder Qingmiao took over the conversation. Senior Martial Sister, did you see this person? Under the corrosion of the dead aura, he's already withered. He doesn't look like a human at all. Elder Qingyi muttered to herself for a while then nodded. Yes, during the fight of magical powers, I vaguely saw his face. Under the dead aura, it simply didn't look like a living person's face. I'm afraid he's already a living dead person now. Emo Tienga thought for a while then asked, Elders, what should we do next? This question caused the two elders to ponder deeply. What should they do next? Of course, they had to find a way to eliminate Ren Yufeng, leave the pagoda, then rebuild Bishuan Court. However, among the 6 people in the pagoda, only 2 were core formation cultivators, and both of them were seriously injured. As for the others, Wei Haolan's injuries were so serious that she was half dead. Mo Tiange guessed that even if her injuries were healed, her cultivation level would still regress. Xia Qing and Tang Shen were both in the early stage of the foundation building realm, and their talents were also very ordinary. As for Mo Tiange herself, although her injuries weren't serious, she was surrounded by dead aura. Not to mention making a realm breakthrough. Even controlling the dead aura wouldn't be easy. Thinking up to this point made Mo Tiange feel a bit desperate. Could it be that they could only wait for Ren Yufeng to make a mistake in his own cultivation? How many months and years would that take? After a long time, Elder Qingyi finally said, "Let's go to the 7th floor." Elder Qingmiao was startled. "Senior Marshal Sister." Elder Qingyi waved her hand, stopping her from continuing. She looked exhausted. "There's no other way. Right now, Bishuan Court's basically been exterminated. Aside from going to the 7th floor, what else can we do?" Elder Qingmiao was dejected and speechless. Elder Qingyi looked up and swept her gaze over the several juniors. "Xia Qing, take care of Haolan. Shin'er, little friendy, come with us." Tang Shen was sitting in a corner in a daze. When he heard what Elder Qingmiao said, he looked up, but he looked like he was in a trance. Elder Qingmiao frowned then shouted, "Shin'er, your great-grandmother's already dead. Do you want her to die with everlasting regret looking like this?" Tang Shen's complexion paled. He clenched his teeth then said in a low voice, "Elders, I understand." Elder Qingmiao nodded. Together with Elder Qingyi, they led the two juniors into the transporting formation. The 4th and 5th floors weren't any different from the 3rd floor. They only had cultivation objects on them. Presumably, the 3 elders usually lived on 1 floor each. When they arrived at the 6th floor, Mo Tiange saw that there was only one huge transporting formation, but it was arranged in the shape of the Big Dipper. After passing through the last transporting formation, they finally arrived at the 7th floor. This floor was actually smaller than the other floors. It was surrounded by densely packed shelves with all kinds of jade slips, books, magic tools, magic weapons, and other things on them. In the center of the floor, there was a jade incense burner, on which a jade statue as tall as 2 people were enshrined. When Mo Tiange looked up and saw the face of this jade statue, her expression changed greatly in an instant. This 7th floor stores several thousand years of Bishuan Court's treasures, and also enshrines our sect's founder, Primordial Lady Bishui. "Little friendy, what's wrong?" Just as she was about to introduce the floor to them, Mo Tiange suddenly stood there in a daze, as if she was struck by lightning. Elder Qingyi frowned as she stared at Primordial Lady Bishui's statue. If it weren't for the fact that Bishuan Court was equivalent to being exterminated, and they didn't have anyone they could use, they definitely wouldn't have let non-disciples enter the 7th floor. But what was with this little friend Ye's reaction? Mo Tiange finally regained her train of thought, but she asked eagerly, "Elders, may I ask what the name of your sect's founder is?" Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao glanced at each other. Their gazes were filled with doubt. "What does little friendy mean?" Mo Tiange bit her lip then raised her head to look at the statue again. This appearance was clearly the same as the image of Mo Yaoqing she saw more than 30 years ago. The image of Mo Yaoqing engraved in her mind. She never thought Primordial Lady Bishui would be Mo Yaoqing, because according to the information she gathered, Bishuan Court was established about 10,000 years ago. Wanderer Ziwei said he and Zhong Muling were cultivators from the same period, and Zhong Muling passed away about 5,000 years ago. Taking into account his lifespan, he was a cultivator from 7,000 years ago at most. Mo Yaoqing was naturally a cultivator from the same period, so the timing didn't match. However, the statue in front of her was clearly Mo Yaoqing's image. Back then, when she triggered the restriction Mo Yaoqing left behind, Mo Yaoqing not only used the art of Sunu, but also forcibly engraved her own life experience in her sea of knowledge, so she absolutely couldn't be mistaken. They were both female cultivators, both in the nascent soul realm. Mo Tiange absolutely didn't believe there could be such a coincidence that a nascent soul female cultivator, who looked exactly like Mo Yaoqing, lived 10,000 years ago. "Elders, your group wasn't established 10,000 years ago, right? Was the founder's surname Mo?" And her name was Yaoqing? Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao's expressions changed greatly. The two of them glanced at each other, then Elder Qingyi said, "Correct. Bishuan Court was established about 6,000 years ago. The so-called 10,000 years is because it's been a long time, so outsiders have long forgotten about it. Little friend Yi, how did you know the name of my founder?" Mo Tiange revealed a bitter smile. There was actually such a coincidence in this world. Mo Yaoqing came from Yunzhong, so maybe when she arrived in the Celestial Pole, her first stop was probably Linhai. She had a pure Ying constitution, and was schemed against by others, so she naturally hated those cultivators who used women as human furnaces. It was probably because of this that she established Bishuan Court. My original surname was Mo, and my name was Tiange, she said slowly. I was born in a place called Mo's village in the secular world. Our Mo family's ancestor was called Mo Yaoqing. Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao widened their eyes and stared at her. Mo Tiange smiled bitterly. I inherited my cultivation technique from this ancestor. Elder Qingyi stared at her and said slowly, "The art of sinew?" "Correct." Mo Tiange sighed and said, "When I was a child, I triggered the restriction my ancestor left in the ancestral hall and obtained the art of sinew. That was how I was able to step onto the path of immortality." "So little friend Yi has a pure Ying constitution?" Elder Qingmiao asked anxiously. Mo Tiange nodded. She stared at Mo Yaoqing's statue and sighed with emotion. "I didn't expect that after several decades, I'd actually come to Linhai." She accurately said Mo Yaoqing's name, and she also possessed the art of sinew, so the two elders already believed her. However, it was actually such a coincidence that they found it hard to believe. "Little friend Yi, can you let me examine your aptitude?" Since she'd already said it, there was nothing to hide, so Mo Tiange stretched out her hand. Elder Qingyi felt her meridians, and her expression became increasingly solemn. Elder Qingmiao then did the same. Both of them were speechless after they finished examining her. Pure Ying constitution. Pure Ying constitution. Ever since our founder passed down the art of sinew, our Bishuan court has never received a female cultivator with a pure Ying constitution. Today, we actually met our founder's descendant. Elder Qingyi heaved a sigh and stared at Mo Tiange. Perhaps this is fate. Our Bishuan court is facing extermination, but Grandmaster has a successor. Chapter 213. Mo Tiange had her own considerations as to why she told them the secret of her pure Ying constitution. First, Bishuan Court was a cultivation group for female cultivators. Among the 6 people in the pagoda, only Tang Shun was a man. Judging from Tang Shun's words and actions, he really couldn't handle such a big responsibility. If it was Elder Qingxi, she might be considerate of Tang Shun. But Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao had no reason to force her. Second, the 6 of them were trapped in the Dao-achieving pagoda, and were now in the same boat. So Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao didn't have any reason to harm her. Third, although cultivators in the cultivation world were self-interested, cultivators in cultivation groups were very respectful to their sect founders. For Mo Yaoqing's sake, they wouldn't do anything to her. Finally, and most importantly, Mo Tiange herself only obtained a part of Mo Yaoqing's art of sinew, and didn't obtain any other secret techniques. If Bishuan Court was a cultivation group established by Mo Yaoqing, it was very likely that Mo Yaoqing passed away here, and her secret techniques were also left here. Mo Tiange already guessed the reason Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao called her and Tang Shen here was because they needed help. Knowing she was the descendant of the sect founder, and that she had a special constitution, it was very likely that they'd pass some of the founder's secret techniques to her. With powerful enemies outside, she really needed to strengthen herself. She was right. After learning she was Mo Yaoqing's descendant and confirming she also had a pure Ying constitution, Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao gave her a jade slip that supposedly recorded some of Mo Yaoqing's unique secret techniques. Elder Qingyi sighed and said, "Unfortunately, you're not a disciple of Bishuan Court. Otherwise." Mo Tiange just smiled and didn't answer. It was impossible for her to stay in Bishuan Court. Even if Bishuan Court's founder was Mo family's ancestor, she couldn't leave Xianqing School just to revive Bishuan Court. She had no interest in being in charge of a cultivation group at all. Her goal was to achieve Dao and become an immortal. However, Bishuan Court had such a relationship with her, so if she made some achievements in the future, it wouldn't be a problem for her to take care of it. In the following time, aside from healing, Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao taught Tang Xin some spells and gave her pointers on how to heal. As it turned out, Dead Aura was only afraid of fire, so they could only slowly use their Dantian real fire to devour and dissolve it. However, the Dantian real fire of a foundation-building cultivator was still very weak, and Ren Yufeng's Dead Aura was also very powerful. It would take Mo Tiange at least more than 10 years to completely dissolve this Dead Aura. Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao's injuries were even worse, so they couldn't help her at all. Mo Tiange, on the other hand, wasn't worried at all. She had a temperament that could endure loneliness, and she was still young, so she could afford to wait. Seeing that she was so calm, Qingyi and Qingmiao admired her even more. Nevertheless, Mo Tiange already had a cultivation group, so it was impossible for her to leave Xianqing School and join Bishuan Court. However, Mo Tiange always felt that the gazes the two elders and Tang Xin gave her after learning her secret were very strange. Putting aside the two elders, Tang Xin's gaze always made her feel a little ambiguous. Could it be that Tang Xin had some thoughts about her? This was not impossible. His great-grandmother, who loved him dearly, had been brutally dismembered, and there was no news of his other relatives. If he wanted revenge, it was possible that she was his target. However, with his weak personality, Mo Tiange didn't take him seriously at all. Before she could ask this question, the two elders went to look for her first. Seniors, Mo Tiange called out once she stepped onto the fourth floor. Now, the third floor was the place where the four juniors recuperated and cultivated. The two elders needed peace and quiet, so they recuperated on the fourth floor. Upon seeing her coming up, Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao both smiled. Tiange, quickly come and sit. After learning about her past, the two of them treated her a lot closer, and now called her by her name. Mo Tiange lowered her head and returned their greeting. She then picked up a small chair across from the two elders and sat down. How are your injuries these days? Elder Qingyi asked first. Mo Tiange answered calmly, they're still the same. This dead aura is really powerful, so I can only slowly refine it now. The two elders naturally understood this situation, but they just wanted to find a topic to talk about. The two of them glanced at each other, but Elder Qingyi still spoke. There's one thing we've been thinking about for a long time, but we still think we should tell you, Elder Qingyi said slowly. To be honest, before you confessed about your past, we also didn't expect there would be such a coincidence. Upon seeing the two elders' cautious expressions, Mo Tiange's expression also became solemn. Seniors, please speak frankly. Is there something wrong with it? No. Elder Qingmiao sighed with emotion. On the contrary, it's very good. Mo Tiange wrinkled her brows in confusion. Elder Qingyi smiled. Forget it, I'll be frank with you. Presumably, you've also noticed that we weren't only surprised to learn you have a pure Yin constitution. In fact, the reason is very simple. Although we've never seen a pure Yin constitution, we've seen a pure Yang constitution. Mo Tiange was startled. She immediately recalled Tang Xin's words and actions in the past few days, and her expression darkened. Upon seeing her expression, Elder Qingmiao smiled and said, it seems you've already guessed it. Yes, the most important reason why Shin'er is so doted on by junior martial sister Qingxi, and the female disciples in the group are all jealous of him. I see. Even if Bishuan Court was a cultivation group for female cultivators, and even if there weren't many high-level male cultivators in Linhai, it didn't make sense for a male cultivator with a weak temperament like Tang Xin to be so popular. So this was the real reason. Mo Tiange calmed herself down and said faintly, in that case, what do the two seniors think about this matter? A pure Yang constitution was naturally the best dual cultivation partner for a pure Yin constitution, but these two constitutions were hard to find even in 1,000 years. Take Yuan Bao and Mo Yaoqing for example. One had a pure yang constitution, and the other had a pure yin constitution. Although they were cultivators from the same generation, there was actually a gap of several hundred years between them, and they were very far apart. If the two of them hadn't coincidentally met Zhong Muling, they probably wouldn't have met each other in their lives. However, although pure yang and pure yin constitutions were a match made in heaven, Yuan Bao and Mo Yaoqing didn't have a good impression of each other, and they never planned to perform dual cultivation together. Mo Tiange never thought she'd meet a male cultivator with a pure yang constitution who lived in the same generation as her. Moreover, he was about the same age as her, and his cultivation level was also quite close. Nevertheless, she once imagined that if she were Mo Yaoqing, would she perform dual cultivation with Yuan Bao? As soon as this thought emerged, she immediately extinguished it. Yes, the path to immortality was difficult, but the path of cultivation relied on one's own efforts. Relying on dual cultivation ultimately went against the original intention of cultivation. Besides, she also disdained handing over her body for this reason. As she stared at Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao, Mo Tiange made up her mind. If they made this request, she absolutely wouldn't agree. She wasn't afraid of them forcing her. How could this kind of thing be forced by outsiders? Besides, they had no one to use now, so they most likely wouldn't choose to have a falling out with her. As if she could see through her thoughts, Elder Qingyi smiled and said, Tiange, with your current cultivation level, even if you don't perform dual cultivation, presumably, forming your gold core won't be a problem. However, dual cultivation also has a lot of benefits, so you can think about it carefully. Upon hearing that Elder Qingyi didn't seem to have any intention of forcing her, Mo Tiange secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Although she'd already made up her mind, she still didn't want to have a conflict with the two elders in the current situation. It was best if they didn't have any intention of forcing her. Seniors, please don't mention this matter again. I once heard that great-grandmother also met a male cultivator with a pure yang constitution, but she never had any intention of performing dual cultivation with him. Presumably, great-grandmother was a proud person and disdained using this kind of method to seek immortality. Although my cultivation level isn't as good as great-grandmother's, our hearts are the same. Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao were silent upon hearing this. Selfishly speaking, they naturally hoped Mo Tiange could perform dual cultivation with Tang Shen. That way, even if Mo Tiange still had to return to Xianqing School in the end, it would still give Bishuan Court hope. Moreover, dual cultivation with pure yin and pure yang constitutions. Needless to say, their cultivation levels would advance very quickly. However, they all knew what kind of person Tang Shen was. His cultivation level was ordinary, and he had a weak personality. If it was any other female cultivator in the school, they might have liked his face. Mo Tiange, on the other hand, came from Kunwu, so he couldn't arouse her interest at all. Most importantly, they proposed dual cultivation for Mo Tiange's sake. With Tang Shen's character, he was doomed to have no great achievements. If Mo Tiange herself objected, it would be meaningless. Thinking up to this point, Elder Qingyi heaved a long sigh and said, "You have your own ideas, so we can't do anything about it. That being the case, you don't need to worry. Shin'er won't do anything out of line." Mo Tiange wasn't worried about this at all. Even if Tang Shen had any ideas, she wouldn't be afraid. "In addition, there's one more thing we want to discuss with you," Elder Qingyi said after some deliberation. As long as they didn't force her to perform dual cultivation, Mo Tiange didn't mind doing something for Bishuan Court. "Senior, please speak frankly. If it's something I can do, I'll certainly do my best." Elder Qingyi smiled. "Since you have this kind of relationship with our school, we originally hoped you could stay in Bishuan Court. However, your Dao heart is firm, and you're unwilling to be troubled by secular matters, so we can't force you. However, you also know Bishuan Court's current situation. Even if most of these disciples manage to escape, we'll still have to spend a lot of energy to rebuild Bishuan Court after we kill that devil cultivator, Junior Marshall's sister Qingmiao, and I already thought of a way to deal with that devil cultivator. but the task of rebuilding the group will fall to the younger generation. Haolan's injuries are heavy, and even if she recovers, her cultivation level will most likely drop to the aura refining realm. Xiaqing and Shen'er aren't ordinary people. Therefore, we hope you can agree to be our Bishuan Court's guest elder. Mo Tiange raised her brows slightly then asked, Seniors, do you want to sacrifice your lives to kill Ren Yufeng? She was so keenly aware of the meaning behind their words that the two elders could only smile wryly. Elder Qingmiao said, correct. Senior Marshal Sister Qingyi and I suffered serious injuries, so our lifespans are affected. We can live for 30 to 50 years at most. Among the 6 people in the pagoda, Haolan's injuries are too heavy, so it'll be very difficult for her to have any great achievements in the future. Xiaqing and Shen'er aren't too enthusiastic about cultivation. So if the two of us fall, Bishuan Court really won't have any hope. If that's the case, we might as well stake our lives. If we can kill that devil cultivator, with Haolan's ability to manage things, rebuilding Bishuan Court won't be a problem. At this point, the two elders both looked at her. Therefore, Tiange, we hope you can become Bishuan Court's guest elder to intimidate those who don't obey us. It was snowing, so it was freezing. Chapter 214. Mo Tiange lowered her gaze as if she was thinking. Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao didn't say anything and just stared at her. After a long time, Mo Tiange finally said, reasonably speaking, I should repay the secret technique the two elders gave Junior's great-grandmother. However, with Junior's current cultivation level, I don't think I'm qualified to be a guest elder. Since she didn't sound like she was going to refuse, Elder Qingyi smiled and said, we two old women won't live for long. When the time comes, there won't be any core formation cultivators in the group, so there's nothing wrong with making you an elder. Besides, with your current cultivation level and talent, it probably won't be difficult for you to form your gold core. At this point, she paused for a moment then sighed. Tiange, the 3 of them aren't enough to rebuild Bishuan Court. I hope you can lend us a hand for the sake of the founder. Such a sincere request actually made it hard for Mo Tiange to refuse. She thought for a moment then asked, if Junior is willing to be a guest elder, how long will I stay in Linhai? Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao smiled. Elder Qingmiao said, not too long. You're a guest elder. As long as Haolan calls the disciples back and establishes her prestige, you can use closed-door meditation as an excuse to return to Kunwu. But I'm a Xianqing school disciple. Is it too bad for me to become a guest elder of another cultivation group? Elder Qingyi said, you don't have to worry about this. There are also disciples from big cultivation groups who become guest elders of other cultivation groups, as long as there's no conflict between the two cultivation groups. Bishuan Court is in Linhai and has no intention of going to Kunwu, so it naturally won't affect you. If you're still worried, you can go back to the group and report to your master. Upon hearing how relaxed Elder Qingyi was, Mo Tiange thought for a moment then slowly nodded. If that's the case, Junior doesn't mind doing my part for Bishuan Court. It can also be considered as repaying seniors for giving me the book. Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao finally felt relieved after receiving her approval. They smiled and said, good, good. From now on, we're on the same side. As they spoke, Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao personally led Mo Tiange down to the 3rd floor and announced to the other 3 that they were inviting Mo Tiange to become a guest elder of Bishuan Court. This news was still quite shocking. Xiaqing couldn't snap back to reality for a moment. Wei Haolan and Tang Shun, who had just regained consciousness, had complicated expressions on their faces. Mo Tiange faced them all with a smile. The so-called guest elders had the title of an elder, but they only took offerings and did not interfere with the affairs of the sect. They all knew Mo Tiange was a disciple of Xianqing school, so there was no reason for her to stay at Bishuan Court. There was no conflict between them and Mo Tiange, so they were only shocked for a moment before they quickly regained their composure. They congratulated her and greeted her again. After they finished greeting each other, Qingyi and Qingmiao returned to the 4th floor to recuperate, while Mo Tiange stayed on the 3rd floor. Fellow Taoist Yi. Wei Haolan's condition was still very heavy, but she was finally awake now. She greeted Emotienga with a smile. From now on we're fellow disciples. Emotienga smiled faintly. Wei Haolan naturally understood the two elders' intentions. Even if her cultivation level was preserved, it would be very difficult for her to make a realm breakthrough in this lifetime. So the elders wanted Emotienga to be her backer. Sect head Wei doesn't need to be so polite. In the future, Bishuan court will still have to rely on you. There's not much I can do. Wei Haolan smiled. You and I both know what the truth is. Fellow Taoist Yi, in short, I'm counting on you. Wei Haolan was a smart person. It was very comfortable to deal with such a smart person, because she knew how to control the situation well. Therefore, after killing Ren Yufeng, with Wei Haolan around, it shouldn't be too difficult for her to become Bishuan court's guest elder. After a brief conversation with Wei Haolan, Tang Shen cautiously glanced at her several times. Eventually, he summoned his courage and said in a low voice, Fellow Taoist Yi, can we talk? Emotienga was a bit surprised. She never expected Tang Shen would take the initiative to talk to her. After thinking about it for a while, she readily agreed. Okay. Tang Shen looked at the transporting formation. Shall we go there? Emotienga nodded. Presumably, the things she wanted to talk to Tang Shen weren't suitable for Wei Haolan and Xia Qing to know. Once they reached the second floor, Emotienga stopped. Fellow Taoist Tang, if you have something to say, just say it. Tang Shen lowered his head, and was silent for a while before he finally said, Fellow Taoist, you must already know I have a pure yang constitution. Yes. Tang Shen seemed to be afraid to look at her. He tilted his head and said, Then, fellow Taoist Yi, what do you think? Emotienga knew what answer he wanted to hear, so she just smiled and said, Fellow Taoist Tang, you might as well tell me what you think. Tang Shen was silent for a long time before he finally said, My great-grandmother was killed by that devil cultivator. My relatives are all outside, and I don't know how they're doing. I want to cultivate well, kill that devil, and avenge my great-grandmother. He looked very serious when he said that, and he finally had a little bit of a man's decisiveness. Nevertheless, Emotienga's tone was still flat. So, Tang Shen looked up and said with unprecedented firmness, Fellow Taoist Yi, can you perform dual cultivation with me? She knew he wanted to mention this matter, but she still didn't expect Tang Shen, who was as weak as a woman, would directly say it. Emotienga paused. Seeing his pleading expression, she shook her head and said, I'm sorry, fellow Taoist Tang, but I can't agree to perform dual cultivation with you. Even though Tang Shen had long seen that Emotienga didn't have any feelings for him, he still didn't expect her to refuse him so decisively. He was stunned for a moment before he said anxiously, Why? Fellow Taoist Yi, I have a pure yang constitution, and you have a pure yin constitution. Being able to meet each other is like a heaven-sent companion. Why would you refuse? Emotienga smiled faintly. Fellow Taoist Tang, why haven't you been willing to perform dual cultivation with your fellow martial sisters all these years? Tang Shen was stunned. He said in a low voice, I don't like them, so then I'm the same. Emotienga's tone was flat. You also have no feelings for me, because I have a pure yin constitution. But if we don't love each other and become dual cultivation partners, what's the difference between us and the past? Tang Shen looked up at her, but didn't say anything. Emotienga stared at this young Master Tang who had never suffered before and said, I won't perform dual cultivation for this kind of reason. I want to walk on the path of becoming an immortal step by step. Her tone was so firm that disappointment flashed across Tang Shen's eyes. But he didn't want to give up. Fellow Taoist Yi, if you perform dual cultivation with me, your cultivation level will advance faster. Emotienga showed a faint smile. Fellow Taoist Tang, in the end, you're not a woman. Perhaps all cultivators put their own interests first. But for women, staying with someone they don't love is indeed a kind of torture. Of course, it's not that fellow Taoist Tang isn't good. Emotienga still had a faint smile on her face, even though she saw his devastated expression. Her eyes flickered. But matters of the heart are like this. I'm a cultivator. But I'm also a woman. Maybe some women can give up their original perseverance for the sake of cultivation. But that doesn't include me. I have my pride. So there are some things I'll stick to until the end. Tang Shen stammered, unable to say anything. Emotinga smiled. Fellow Taoist Tang, aren't you the same? Don't be blinded by your ancestors' death. Dual cultivation is, after all, a side path to the great Tao of cultivation. If your goal is also to achieve the great Tao, it'd be better to stick to your original heart and calmly guard it. That way you'll definitely gain more. It was so cold that her hands were stiff. She temporarily finished writing today's 5,000 words. Chapter 215. Sure enough, after Emotinga dismissed him, Tang Shen no longer looked for her. His gaze when he looked at her was no different from before. Obviously, he'd let go of this thought. On the contrary, he cultivated a lot more diligently. Every time he encountered a problem, he would take advantage of the two elders' free time to ask for advice or ask Emotinga. In this current situation, Tang Shen was a help, so Emotinga didn't hide anything and told him everything she knew. As a result, Tang Shen's cultivation level rose very quickly. After all, he had a pure yang constitution, so his spiritual roots shouldn't be as bad as hers back then. As for other matters, the two core formation elders already had their own plans. Emotinga was only a guest elder in name, so she couldn't manage them, and it wasn't convenient for her to talk about them. Besides, she didn't have a better way. Ren Yufeng's strength was too terrifying. She couldn't enter the virtual sky world for the time being, so she couldn't concoct medicinal pills. It was already troublesome enough to refine the dead aura on her body, so it was impossible for her to make a realm breakthrough. Since she couldn't make a realm breakthrough, she couldn't deal with Ren Yufeng, so this matter could only be decided by Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao. On the 7th floor of the Tao Achieving Pagoda, there were several thousand years' worth of Bishuan quartz savings, which contained a lot of good things. Now that they were facing extermination, Elder Qingyi decided to use these savings. Because of this, Qingxia wholeheartedly focused on concocting medicinal pills after she recovered from her injuries. As for Wei Haolan, she was indispensable in rebuilding the group, so the two elders were extremely generous and gave her the spiritual medicines they'd stored for a long time. Several months later, Wei Haolan's injuries finally stabilized, and she also preserved her cultivation level. However, she was also surrounded by dead aura, so she might need more time to recover than Emotinga did. Moreover, her Dantian was injured, so she basically had no hope of advancing to the core formation realm. After learning about this from the two elders, Wei Haolan was dazed for a long time. Even if she was a cultivator who valued power more, it was still hard for her to accept that she might not be able to make a realm breakthrough. Fortunately, Wei Haolan was a strong person and had long prepared for her injuries, so she quickly adjusted her mood. She continued to heal her injuries every day and assisted Xia Qing in concocting medicinal pills. In the blink of an eye, a year had passed. Elder Qingyi and Qingmiao finally recovered from their injuries after using spiritual medicines. They announced that they'd enter closed-door meditation to cultivate secret techniques, and that no one was allowed to disturb them on the 4th floor. After learning this news, Wei Haolan and the other two elders were dazed and looked sad, which made Tiange quite confused. She recalled what Qingyi and Qingmiao said when they invited her to be their guest official last time, so she secretly asked Wei Haolan about it. Sect leader Wei, does the secret art that the two elders spoke of harm one's life? Wei Haolan paused for a moment, then said with a sigh, Fellow Taoist Yi is now Bishuan Court's guest elder, so I should tell you about these things. Sect Wei Ling Wei for Qing I Ling Long from Ling, I R Wei. Uphim Sect. The Mo. Sect, Ling. Sect Long Ling. By Sect Ling. From. I. The second half of this secret technique can only be practiced by cultivators at or above the core formation stage. Furthermore, it is time-consuming and laborious. Its effect is to combine the cultivation of several people into one. In this way, one will become the most powerful existence among core formation cultivators. In other words, Elder Qingxi used this blood prohibition secret technique? Wei Haolan nodded. Correct. Unfortunately, Elder Qingxi was already seriously injured at that time, and that person's power was extraordinary, so she could only stall him for a short while. What about Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao? Mo Tiange's expression was heavy. What would happen if they used this secret technique? Wei Haolan smiled bitterly. Although this secret technique can be practiced by cultivators in the core formation realm or higher, none of the core formation grandmasters of Bishuan court ever practiced it. Mo Tiange was stunned. Why is that? Even if they couldn't protect their lives, it was still good to learn it just in case. Why didn't anyone practice it? Because, Wei Haolan said slowly, anyone who practices the second half of the blood prohibition secret technique can no longer be considered a human. Mo Tiange was silent for a long time. Can no longer be considered a human? What did that mean? If they weren't a human, what else could they be? As if she saw through Mo Tiange's confusion, Wei Haolan shook her head and said, the so-called blood prohibition requires blood as the price. If a person's blood is drained, wouldn't they become a mummy? How could they still be considered a human? Mo Tiange was dumbfounded. Wei Haolan looked away, hiding the sadness in her eyes. The two elders are already unafraid of death. We still have to cultivate diligently, rebuild Bishuan court, and fulfill their unfulfilled wishes. It was no wonder the three of them had such expressions when they learned the two elders were going to practice the secret technique. Practicing this secret technique had doomed them from the very beginning. Whether they succeeded or not, they would still die. With such a heavy heart, Mo Tiange threw herself into recuperating and practicing spells. A strong enemy was right next to her, but she couldn't do anything. This kind of feeling was too unbearable. Ever since she built her foundation, she'd never had such an urgent desire to become stronger. Therefore, after confirming she had to spend a lot of time refining the dead aura, she devoted all her energy to studying the jade slip Mo Yaoqing left behind. In fact, this jade slip didn't contain any earth-shattering secret techniques. Instead, it contained all the techniques to use spells, as well as the cultivation experience of the art of Sinu. Nevertheless, Mo Yaoqing was indeed a genius. Simple spells, after being explained by her, became more powerful. She made some subtle modifications, but they practically changed the appearance of some spells and greatly increased their power. Among them, the cultivation experience of the art of Sinu made Mo Tiange eagerly throw herself into it. Her main cultivation technique was the Sinu art of the origin modified by Zhong Muling, but it was a combination of Taiyuan record and the art of Sinu. There was no difference in the details between the two, so Mo Yaoqing's cultivation experience was completely applicable to Mo Tiange. In addition, there were also some things Mo Yaoqing casually recorded in the jade slip, such as the modification of some pill recipes, the concept of refining magic weapons, the methods of concocting medicinal pills, refining tools, formations, restrictions, and so on. Mo Tiange could see that these things were just her usual thoughts. Some of them had been tested, but some of them were just ideas. However, to be able to conceive pill recipes and a completely new method of refining magic weapons, she could definitely be regarded as a grandmaster, especially since there were so many aspects involved. After learning that Mo Yaoqing was such an all-rounder, Mo Tiange was both amazed and puzzled at the same time. With Mo Yaoqing's talent, she was almost not inferior to Wanderer Ziwei. So why was her original sect only treating her as an excellent dual cultivation candidate instead of cultivating her for the future? Mo Yaoqing's notes at the back of the jade slip solved her doubts. I stepped onto the path of immortality at the age of 5, built my foundation at the age of 20, formed my gold core at 100, and entered the nascent soul realm at 500. Outsiders don't know the hardships I went through, but it's a pity that I'm a woman with a pure Yin constitution. Otherwise, how could I wander from place to place, wander in a foreign land, and never be able to return to my homeland? As a woman, the path of immortality isn't easy. I think I'm talented and intelligent, but because I have a pure Yin constitution, I've always been regarded as a human furnace. I carefully investigated the reason, It's probably because most people on the path of immortality are men. Over time, people in the world were blinded by a single leaf and didn't recognize women's talents. This confession was filled with sighs of not being able to appreciate a woman's talent. Emo Tienga also sighed when she read it. In all fairness, although she also felt she was talented and intelligent compared to Emo Yaoqing, she had no choice but to look up to her. There were too many things she had to learn from the records in this jade slip. Not to mention in the future, the current her definitely couldn't compare to Emo Yaoqing. Whether it was Emo Yaoqing or that wanderer Ziwei, both made her realize that there were such geniuses in this world. She still had a long way to go, so she mustn't be complacent. The back of the notes also recorded some of Emo Yaoqing's private affairs. I met a male cultivator in Yunzhong. His name was Zhong Muling. He unexpectedly had a pure neutral constitution, and his nature was even rarer. He was indeed someone worth befriending. I met a man with a pure yang constitution. He was indeed a good match. However, this person was arrogant and I didn't like him, so I dropped the matter. Later on she wrote, unable to reach the nascent soul realm for a long time, I was extremely anxious. My enemies increased day by day. If I didn't make a realm breakthrough soon, it would be difficult for me to protect my body. After thinking for several days, I finally came up with a plan. This plan was the worst plan. Once I used it, I would feel ashamed to face Zhong Muling. However, I couldn't find a better plan for the time being. The man she mentioned should be Yuan Bao, but her tone sounded like she didn't care at all. Presumably, a genius like Emo Yaoqing was also very arrogant and disdained the path of dual cultivation. However, what method did she mention? Would she feel ashamed to face Zhong Muling? As Emo Tienga read on, she finally understood. Theoretically, dual cultivation with a pure yang constitution is more effective, but I really didn't like that Taoist Yuan Bao. However, Zhong Muling's nature was sincere, so I liked him very much. He also had a pure neutral constitution. Although dual cultivation wasn't as good as a pure yang constitution, it wasn't bad either. Although I was on good terms with Zhong Muling, this matter was really unfair to him. It was hard for me to say it, so I used the soul-frightening bell to confuse him. In the end, dual cultivation became a matter. Emo Tienga was dumbfounded. As it turned out, Zhong Muling was actually this ancestor of Emo Yaoqing's. Not only was her intelligence not inferior to a man's, but her methods and courage were also comparable to a man's. On one hand, Emo Tienga admired her, but on the other hand, she felt that this matter was indeed not very kind. How could Zhong Muling be willing? Zhong Muling isn't a fickle person. What I did this time wasn't honorable enough, so I expected he'd definitely break off our friendship after he woke up. Unexpectedly, although Zhong Muling wasn't very happy, he didn't turn hostile towards me. He said I'd treated him well in the past, so he decided to let this matter go. I felt guilty, so after thinking about it, I decided to leave Yunzhong. After that, she talked about everything that happened in Linhai. She set up the transporting formation, went to Kunwu to rescue a group of women who were used as human furnaces, established Bishuan Court, and called herself Primordial Lady Bishui. Emo Tienga found some messy accounts interspersed in the story. After one night of being husband and wife, I unexpectedly became pregnant. I wholeheartedly wanted to cultivate to become an immortal, so I originally shouldn't have kept him. However, I couldn't bear it, so out of consideration for his father, I finally gave birth to him. Unfortunately, this child didn't have spiritual roots, and was destined to have no fate with me, so I could only leave him in the secular world. There were many other things in between. Emo Tienga found another passage at the end. I'm now in the middle stage of the nascent soul realm. I don't have much time left in my lifespan, so I already have no hope of making a realm breakthrough. Thinking about how I gave birth to a child in the past, I've had many descendants in the past several hundred years, but there are only a few people who have spiritual roots. Moreover, all of them have wasted spiritual roots, so it's inconvenient for me to lead them on the path to immortality. There are also 2 or 3 people with pure Yin constitution, but none of them have spiritual roots. Now that I'm about to pass away, The art of Sinu will eventually be lost, so I have no choice but to take a trip to the secular world and seal a strand of my divine sense. If there are descendants with pure Yin constitution, I'll pass on the art of Sinu. Chapter 216. After reading all the records, Mo Tiange didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Not only was her ancestor not inferior to men in intelligence, but she was also more decisive and courageous than men in handling things. She recalled the few days they spent together in Zhong Muling's virtual sky world. Zhong Muling was serious in speech and manner, but it turned out he used to have such a temperament. Facing Mo Yaoqing, he was no match for her in terms of momentum. Even the matter of dual cultivation was schemed against. No wonder there didn't seem to be any emotional disputes between Zhong Muling and Mo Yaoqing. As it turned out, this was the origin of the Mo family's inheritance of several thousand years. After sealing her divine sense in the Mo family's ancestral hall, Mo Yaoqing returned to Linhai. She also left her last words, entrusting the younger generation of Bishuan court to take care of her descendants. However, when she was in the Mo family's village, Mo Tiange never saw the disciples sent by Bishuan court. Perhaps Bishuan court never found a person with spiritual roots who could be accepted as a disciple. So as time passed, the inheritors of the later generations no longer paid attention to them. It was also possible that they only came once every 20 or 30 years, or even longer. However, from the time she was born until she left, it was only a short 10 years. Mo Tiange sighed when she read this. She had a father who was a core formation cultivator, a great ancestor who occasionally went to Jin to see his descendants, and a great-grandmother who entrusted her descendants to take care of them. But she ended up walking on the path to immortality. It could only be said that she was really not a lucky person. However, on the other hand, if she hadn't wandered from place to place for more than 10 years, she might not have the temperament she had today. She might be as proud and complacent as Hua Yilin, or as weak and timid as Tang Shen. Suffering itself wasn't a beautiful memory, but sometimes, people still had to be grateful for some things that suffering brought, such as a strong heart and broad knowledge. After learning about Mo Yaoqing's life, Mo Tiange began to study some fragmentary things she recorded. In terms of formations, she made considerable progress by comparing them with Xuanji formation book. Although there were many books in the virtual sky world, there were too many books that surpassed her realm, so she couldn't understand many of them. The environment of the distant past era was also different from today's, so she couldn't copy them. Xuanji formation book and Mo Yaoqing's records happened to make up for this shortcoming. In addition, Mo Tiange noticed that there was a paragraph in Mo Yaoqing's notes. A magic treasure, a treasure that contains magic power. Cultivation affects a cultivator's advancement, but magic treasures represent a cultivator's strongest battle strength. Especially for core formation cultivators, the strength of their natal magic treasures almost determines the strength of their combat abilities. Cultivators in the core formation realm and above could refine their natal magic treasures. They would add their natal blood essence and refine it in their dantian, continuously nourishing it with their blood essence. Over time, the magic treasure would even become sentient. Simply put, a natal magic treasure was a magic treasure that was closely related to the cultivator. The longer it was nurtured, the greater its power would be. If the natal magic treasure was damaged, the cultivator would also be damaged. I've wandered the world all my life, from Yunzhong to the celestial pole. I don't know how many opponents I've met, and how many magic treasures I've seen. Because of this, I've come up with several types of magic treasures for future disciples to choose as their natal magic treasures. Mo Tiange's spirit was lifted, and she continued to read. In the past, when I was in Yunzhong's Heavenly Treasure Pavilion, I once saw a legend recorded in ancient times. In the legend, the Mother of Creation had a magic treasure called the Mountain and River Map. This map is actually a huge magic formation. If you're trapped inside, it'll be like the changes of the four symbols. If you think of a mountain, it'll be a mountain. If you think of water, it'll be water. If you think of the future, it'll be forward. If you think of the future, It'll be back. I've thought about it for a long time and came up with several types of magic treasures. Today I can try them out one by one. There were only 5 types of magic treasures, namely killing, protecting, confusing, trapping, and auxiliary. The killing type was used to attack. The protecting type was used to defend. The confusing type could make one lose their mind. The trapping type was used as a formation. The auxiliary type was used to break formations or clear one's mind. The auxiliary type was used to assist. The shuttle of flying Apsara was an offensive magic tool. Although it also had the function of setting formations, it was a killing formation. The white silk handkerchief was a defensive magic tool. The enchanting lantern, although it had the word enchanting in it, was actually a trapping formation. The cloud-treading boots and the spirit-concealing pendant were auxiliary magic tools. Mo Tiange reckoned the mountain and river map Mo Yaoqing mentioned should be a combination of trapping and confusing, and it also had the effect of killing. This kind of magic treasure was the most difficult to guard against because it was aimed at the weakness of a person's mental state. A brilliant confusing magic treasure could make people fall into its trap without them realizing it. If it was really like what Mo Yaoqing said, where one thought of mountains and rivers, one needed to have a very strong willpower to get rid of it. However, even a nascent soul cultivator's mental state wasn't perfect. 5 elements plate. This plate is actually a large formation plate with the following formation engraved on it. The advantage of this thing is that it can be used without using too much spiritual aura. But its disadvantage is that it's hard to deal with for people who know formations like the back of their hand. Black and white life and death chess. This thing is shaped like a chess piece. If you make a wrong move, you'll be killed. The materials needed are very expensive. The production method is as follows. Unfortunately, the confusing effect isn't strong, so it's difficult to reach the state where one thinks of mountains and rivers. Heaven and earth fan. The painting of mountains and rivers as the surface of the fan is actually a formation, but it can be made like this. If it can be made like this, it'll be very powerful. Unfortunately, the materials are too hard to find. Mo Tiange's gaze fell on this heaven and earth fan. Its main materials were clearly written. The handle is made from the bone of an 8th-rank spiritual beast and above, with 1,000-year-old chalcedony. The bone of a divine beast is the best, and the older the chalcedony the better. The painting of the fan is made from a bewitching moonstone. She hastily went back to read it again. Yes, the main materials were clearly written, and it just so happened that she had the bone of a divine dragon and the bewitching moonstone. Mo Tiange didn't think much about her natal magic weapon before. She had a middle-stage nascent soul master, so after she formed her gold core, she could naturally get a lot of magic weapon formulas from her master. At that time, she could just choose one. But if this heaven and earth fan was really as powerful as Mo Yaoqing said, it could basically be regarded as a top-grade magic weapon. Generally speaking, the natal magic weapons of core formation cultivators weren't very good, probably because they were limited by their abilities and materials for magic weapons above the middle grade were too difficult to find. However, natal magic weapons were too important, and no cultivator was willing to wait until they were in the middle or late stage, or even the nascent soul realm to refine them. Compared to natal magic weapons, ordinary magic weapons were a bit inferior, even if they were 1 rank higher. Therefore, they would usually refine ordinary natal magic weapons as soon as they formed their gold cores, and slowly cultivate them with their blood essence over a long period of time. After a long time, the magic weapons would gradually become more powerful. But if the magic weapons they refined from the beginning were excellent, they would have a higher starting point than others, and would naturally become more powerful in the future. In addition, she was skilled in formations, so it would be best if she could use formations as magic weapons. After thinking for a while, she went to find Wei Haolan, who was studying ancient books. Sect Head Wei, do you have time? Wei Haolan looked up from the book and asked with a smile. Fellow Taoist Yi, do you need something? Mo Tiange said. I have something to ask. Wei Haolan looked at Xia Qing, who was concocting pills, and Tang Shen, who was concentrating on cultivating, then said, "Let's go downstairs." Emotinga nodded. Concocting pills and cultivating generally couldn't be disturbed. But the two elders were worried that no one would take care of them. If something happened, it would be troublesome to deal with them, so they let the four of them cultivate on the same floor. Usually, the four of them did their own things and didn't disturb each other. The two of them went to the second floor, found two praying mats at random and sat down. Emotinga waved the jade slip in her hand. Sect Head Wei, may I ask if anyone has tried to refine the magic weapons recorded in the Patriarch's notes? Wei Haolan took the jade slip and immersed her divine sense into it. After a while, she answered, "The Patriarch's notes can only be studied by the elders and the sect head. Some people have indeed tried to refine some of the magic weapons and medicinal pills recorded in it. I remember when I was young, a core formation elder tried to refine a purple gold gourd. Although he failed, it proved that it was possible to refine this treasure." "What about this one?" Emotinga asked. "Has anyone refined this heaven and earth fan?" Wei Haolan looked at it then shook her head. "Fellow Taoist Yi, this heaven and earth fan requires the bones of spiritual beasts in the 8th rank or above. After the Patriarch, only one nascent soul cultivator appeared in our Bichuan court. Where could we get the materials?" That was true. Not to mention the bones of 8th rank spiritual beasts. Even a 1,000-year-old chalcedony is hard to find. Even if it occasionally appears, it'll sell for more than 10,000 spirit stones at the very least. Also, we don't know what this Qiyun stone is. I estimate the materials needed to refine this magic weapon would cost at least tens of thousands of spirit stones, as well as absolute good luck and super strong strength. At this point, Wei Haolan shook her head and sighed. Not to mention that we can't get them. Even if we did, we wouldn't refine a magic weapon we don't know if we can successfully refine. We're too short on materials. I see. Emotinga was a bit disappointed. If Bichuan court had refined these magic weapons before, she would try to refine them. If she liked them, she would use them as her natal magic weapon. This magic weapon was too powerful. It could trap, confuse, and kill. It would be very difficult to find a more powerful magic weapon. Fellow Taoist Emo, do you want to refine this magic weapon? Wei Haolan asked. Emotinga nodded then shook her head. After we go back this time, I'll enter closed-door meditation to advance to the core formation realm. If I succeed, I'll have to refine my natal magic weapon first. Originally, I saw how powerful this magic weapon was, so I was just considering it. I didn't have to refine it. Wei Haolan said, "If it's fellow Taoist Yi, it'll be much more convenient than us. Your sect is a big cultivation group, so it naturally has more information and materials than us. Your master also has a rather high status, so if he lacks anything, he can order his disciples to slowly look for it." That's true, but the cost is really expensive, and the materials are too rare. Let's take a look first. After I return to the group, I'll report to my master and see if it's feasible. Upon hearing what Emotinga said, Wei Haolan said with a stern expression, "Fellow Taoist Yi, you're now Bichuan court's guest elder, so you can naturally read this notebook. However, many of the things in it are Bichuan court secrets, so I hope you won't leak them." Emotinga said, "Rest assured, Sect Head Wei, I won't take out the notebook. I'll just let my master evaluate the formula of this magic weapon." Wei Haolan hesitated for a moment but eventually nodded. "That's fine. In any case, this magic weapon formula was just sitting there in Bichuan court. No one would refine it." Emotinga smiled then asked, "Sect Head Wei, how are your injuries?" Wei Haolan said, "They're the same as before. Although my cultivation level is preserved, my Dantian was seriously injured, so I have to slow down my recovery." At this point, she sighed and said, "In any case, the two elders still have to spend a long time cultivating secret techniques, so I'll just take my time to heal. Fellow Taoist Yi, what about you? Are you feeling better?" Wei Haolan had always been very concerned about Emotinga's injuries. Emotinga knew Wei Haolan was now a guest elder, and Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao told Wei Haolan that she'd be assisting Bichuan court in its reconstruction. So Wei Haolan was very concerned about her injuries. However, no matter what the reason was, it was always good to have someone care about her. I'm fine, Emotinga answered. The dead aura I'm suffering from isn't much, so it didn't harm my foundation. However, the Dantian real fire of a foundation building cultivator is too weak for this dead aura. According to my estimation, it might take me 7 or 8 years, or even 10 years to completely refine it. Wei Haolan was silent for a while upon hearing Emotinga's answer. She then said, that being the case, let Junior Marshal Sister Xia concoct some medicinal pills for you. Maybe it'll be a bit faster. Emotinga shook her head. I don't lack medicinal pills, so Sect Head Wei doesn't need to worry. Although there were a lot of medicinal pills stored in the pagoda, in the end, pill concocting required fresh spiritual plants, so there weren't many medicinal pills that could be concocted. Since she was now a guest elder of Bishuan Court, she also had to think about Bishuan Court. She really didn't need to fight with Wei Haolan and Tang Shen over these medicinal pills. Chapter 217. Every day, she would heal her injuries, cultivate, and study the notes Emo Yaoqing left behind. Emo Tiange only felt that time flew by. In the blink of an eye, several years had passed just like that. She had a temperament that could endure loneliness. She had also been in closed-door meditation for several years before. So now that she was immersed in Emo Yaoqing's cultivation experiences, she didn't find it difficult at all. In any case, she just considered it closed-door meditation. It was common for foundation-building cultivators to be in closed-door meditation for several years, or even dozens of years. Wei Haolan was also like this. She spent most of her time healing and refining the dead aura. Occasionally, she chatted with Emo Tiange about some matters related to the group, which allowed Emo Tiange to learn more about Bishuan Court's situation. Presumably, Wei Haolan also did this deliberately. She shouldered the heavy responsibility of rebuilding Bishuan Court, but Xia Qing and Tang Shen couldn't share this responsibility with her. Emo Tiange, on the other hand, was appointed by the two elders to help her rebuild the group in the future, so she had to have a rough understanding of the group's situation. Xia Qing also sometimes talked about pill concocting with her. She was a simple-minded person, so even in this kind of situation, she was still thinking about pill concocting. As for Tang Shen, he obviously didn't have enough patience. His cultivation level was only in the early stage of the foundation building realm, and he wasn't very old, so presumably, he spent very little time in closed-door meditation after building his foundation. However, he also knew how to be patient because of his great hatred. In the beginning, he often couldn't concentrate on cultivating, but gradually, he was able to meditate for several days, or even several months like them. As for Ren Yufeng, who was outside the pagoda, sometimes he didn't show up for a long time, so long that they thought he'd lost his patience, but then he suddenly appeared. In the beginning, Ren Yufeng was still interested in showing off to the people inside the pagoda, but they never paid attention to him. Later he got tired of it, and simply occupied Bishuan Court's monastery, playing the game of founding a sect. He captured the individual cultivators in the vicinity, and some former Bishuan Court cultivators, called it Divine Dragon Sect, and proclaimed himself the sect head. For the sake of survival, these cultivators all became yes-men. This greatly satisfied Ren Yufeng, so he simply became the sect head of Divine Dragon Sect. He only sent 2 cultivators to guard the entrance of the Dao Achieving Pagoda, and no longer paid attention to them. Emo Tiange remembered that when Ren Yufeng first gathered people outside the Dao Achieving Pagoda to hold the so-called sect-establishing ceremony, Wei Haolan looked at the crowd below with tears in her eyes. She saw her loved ones among these people. Their figures were thin and frail, their bodies covered in scars. They must have suffered great torment, looking like walking corpses. She once asked Wei Haolan roughly how many Bishuan Court cultivators were still alive. Wei Haolan was silent for a long time. In the end, she said, "Perhaps there are still a lot of people alive, but after being tortured like this, I'm afraid they don't even have the least bit of self-respect left. It's not difficult to rebuild the sect and call back the disciples, but it's very difficult to restore the confidence they once had as cultivators. Emotienga was speechless. She didn't have any management skills, so she couldn't help. Year after year, time flowed like water. Finally, 10 years later, Emotienga completely dissolved all the dead aura and returned to her peak state. She then devoted herself wholeheartedly to cultivating. The teleportation formation on the 4th floor was still closed, and there was no news from the 2 elders. The 4 of them had no choice but to wait. After another 5 years, with the support of Xia Qing's medicinal pills, Tang Xin finally advanced to the middle stage of the foundation building realm, bringing a trace of joy to the Dao-achieving pagoda that had been dull for more than 10 years. To encourage everyone, Wei Haolan suggested they take a day off to celebrate with Tang Xin. However, they'd been locked up in the pagoda for more than 10 years, so they couldn't hold any banquets. Fortunately, Wei Haolan left some good wine in her Qianquan bag, so they could use it to make up for the occasion. Junior Marshal Brother Tang, it's your happy occasion, so you should drink a bit more today. Wei Haolan urged him to drink with a smile. Xia Qing also temporarily put aside pill concocting and nodded repeatedly. That's right, Senior Marshal Brother Tang. It's only been more than 10 years since you advanced to the middle stage, right? Advancing to the middle stage in 30 years is really amazing. Tang Xin touched his nose somewhat embarrassedly and said, If I wasn't locked up in the pagoda and could only restrain my thoughts, I wouldn't have advanced so quickly. Besides, Junior Marshal Sister Xia has been concocting medicinal pills for me. Fellow Taoist Yi has been explaining her experiences to me, and Senior Marshal Sister Sect Head has often comforted me. It's all thanks to all of you that I can advance so quickly. After more than 10 years of devoted cultivation, although he was still thin-skinned, he no longer blushed easily, and his temperament also became a lot calmer. Wei Haolan said with a smile, This is all we can do. You still have to rely on yourself to cultivate. Junior Marshal Brother Tang, you're not even 60 years old yet, but you're already in the middle stage of the foundation building realm. You're indeed one of the best talents in our Bishuan court. Tang Xin smiled, but his expression soon turned gloomy again. Bishuan court only has us left. Wei Haolan and Xia Qing were both silent upon hearing what he said. Outside the Dao-achieving pagoda, cultivators occasionally came and went, but they were no longer Bishuan court disciples. Soon, however, Wei Haolan forced a smile and said, What's there to be afraid of? When the 2 elders come out of closed-door meditation and eliminate that devil cultivator, we can naturally rebuild the group. Besides, many of the original disciples are still here. We can just call them back when the time comes. Tang Xin also realized he shouldn't have mentioned this matter, so he also smiled and chimed in. Right. What Senior Marshal Sister Sect Head said is right. We can just go out and rebuild the group. Come, let's drink. As he said that, Tang Xin gulped down a cup of wine. Unexpectedly, he didn't know how to drink, and this wine was quite spicy, so his expression immediately became distorted, looking extremely wonderful. Upon seeing his expression, the 3 women present all laughed. This was Bishuan Court's most popular handsome man, young Master Tang Xin. He was always graceful, gentle, and refined. When had he ever lost his composure like this? Junior Marshal Brother Tang, if you can't drink, just drink a little less. Come, wipe your mouth. Wei Haolan handed him a towel, but she still couldn't help but look at him with a smile. She said he was a lot calmer now, but he still couldn't help but blush. With great difficulty, Tang Xin finally managed to swallow the wine. He took the towel then coughed while wiping the spilled wine. I've made Senior Marshal Sisters and Junior Marshal Sisters laugh at me. Xia Qing waved her hand. Senior Marshal Brother Tang, this is nothing. Previously, I secretly smeared 3 leaves golden sunflower powder on Senior Marshal Sister Hua's medicinal pills. Senior Marshal Sister Hua's expression was truly wonderful. 3-leafed golden sunflower was a kind of commonly seen spiritual medicine. It didn't have much use, but it was very spicy. Just a little bit of it would make people who couldn't eat spicy food feel like their mouths were on fire. Mo Tienga once used it as a seasoning, so she was very clear about it. Upon hearing what Xia Qing said, Mo Tienga asked, Is the senior martial sister Hua you're talking about, that fellow Taoist Hua Yilin? Yes, Xia Qing said with a disdainful expression. I don't like senior martial sister Hua. She always likes to put on airs, and even gives me that attitude. She never thought that her medicinal pills were in my hands. At this point, Xia Qing's expression turned gloomy. In the past, I wasn't sensible and always thought senior martial sister Hua was hateful, so I wanted to embarrass her whenever I had the chance. In fact, senior martial sister Hua didn't do anything bad. She was just a bit arrogant and despotic. I wonder how she's doing now. The atmosphere once again turned silent. Even though they were forcing themselves to smile, they still remembered their sorrowful past from time to time. Let's not talk about this. This time, it was Tang Shen who spoke. He turned towards Wei Haolan. Senior martial sister sect head, are your injuries healed? Wei Haolan nodded with a smile. They're almost healed. The dead aura has been dissolved. In the future, as long as I slowly meditate and recuperate, my injuries will naturally heal. Xia Qing said. Senior martial sister sect head, during this period of time, I'll concoct another batch of healing medicinal pills for you. You mustn't be reluctant to take them. If you're not well, Bishuan Court is not well. You have to cherish yourself. Yes, Tang Shen took over. In the past, I wasn't sensible and always caused trouble for senior martial sister sect head. In the future, I'll definitely cultivate diligently. Wei Haolan smiled. Her smile was filled with joy. You're all sensible now. That's good. Her gaze then shifted towards Mo Tiange, who had been silent all this time. Fellow Taoist Yi, these past few years, thanks to you often teaching junior martial brother Tang, I'm afraid junior martial sister Xia, and I don't have any hope of advancing to the core formation realm. So we can only count on you and junior martial brother Tang. Mo Tiange showed a faint smile. It's nothing. I'm now Bishuan Court's guest elder, so I naturally have to do my part. In fact, Tang Shen could be considered quite intelligent. He also had a pure young constitution and decent spiritual roots. In the past, perhaps because of his flawed character, he was always unable to meditate and cultivate. In the past 10-odd years, he had to meditate even if he didn't want to. Moreover, he was stimulated by his great hatred, so he constantly reminded himself to be strong, so he grew very fast. Mo Tiange reckoned that even if he couldn't form his nascent soul, forming his core shouldn't be a problem. Yes, fellow Taoist Yi is now one of us. Xia Qing interrupted. Therefore, fellow Taoist Yi, you mustn't hide anything. We should discuss pill concocting issues more often. Xia Qing once again changed the topic to pill concocting out of habit, causing the other three people to laugh. Wei Haolan paused for a moment then said, since fellow Taoist Yi is one of us, wouldn't it be too distant for us to still call her fellow Taoist Yi? That's true, Xia Qing said. But I seem to have heard the two elders call fellow Taoist Yi something before? It's been too long, so I can't remember. The corners of Mo Tiange's mouth curved into a smile. My original surname was Mo, and my name was Tiange. Oh, right, it seems to be Tiange. Fellow Taoist Yi, why did you use a fake name? Oh no, let's just call her senior martial sister Mo from now on. Yi Xiaotian isn't a fake name. This was the first time she explained the problem of names to others. Mo is my mother's surname, while my father's surname is Yi. Yi Xiaotian was the name my uncle gave me. Yi Mo. Xia Qing thought for a moment. Both are good, but since Mo Tiange is her original name, let's just call her senior martial sister Mo from now on, okay? It's hard to say who's older and who's younger. Yi Haolan knew Mo Tiange's background, so she said with a smile, junior martial sister Xia, in terms of cultivation level, you have to call me senior martial sister. In terms of age, you should count your years first. And I don't need to count my years. To you, I'm already an old woman. Senior martial sister, you're only 100 years old. How are you old? Xia Qing spoke quickly. Right now, I think I'm 53. I also know senior martial brother Tang. You're older than me, by 6 years? You should be 59 now, right? Tang Shen nodded with a smile. Senior martial sister Mo, What about you? Emotinga said with a smile. In that case, you really have to call me senior martial sister. I'm 55 now, so I'm 2 years older than you. Ah, Xiaqing was astonished. Even Tang Shen's eyes widened. Since they were injured and hid inside the Dao Achieving Pagoda, Emotinga didn't need to hide her cultivation level anymore. Therefore, Xiaqing and Tang Shen already knew she was a late-stage foundation-building cultivator. But since the two elders in Wei Haolan didn't care, they didn't say anything. It was also because of this that Xiaqing called Emotinga senior martial sister, as if it was a matter of course. She was 55 now, and they had been hiding inside the Dao Achieving Pagoda for 16 years. Didn't that mean she was only 39 years old back then? A 39-year-old late-stage foundation-building cultivator. This was indeed astonishing. Tang Shen was the first to regain his train of thought. He said sincerely, "It turns out fellow Taoist Yi is such a genius. I was really rude." Other people didn't know, but Emotinga understood the hidden meaning in his words. However, this matter was Tang Shen's misunderstanding. Back then, Emotinga rejected his dual cultivation proposal not because she thought his aptitude wasn't good enough for her, but because she didn't want to perform dual cultivation with him. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.